Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly.
All right, folks, how we doing today? It is Friday night, the last day of January. It's a little cold here, but it's not too bad. How we doing today, Bill? How we doing today, Anthony?
Randall, we're doing great. It's Friday night. Senior Bowl game is tomorrow. We had a good week of practices, seen some winners, seen some losers, risers and fallers. So we figured what better way to celebrate that than with a 32 GM mock draft. Folks, first off, if you're watching with us, thank you for watching. Make sure that you like the video on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the NFL Draft Fanatic and Draft Professor YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell. We've got daily draft content coming at you. Some nights we double up and double down with 2 episodes a night. Make sure that you check out our lovely moderator, Randall Slifer, at Randall Slifer. He's on X. He's also over on Blue Sky. You can find me on X at Spark Scouting, as well as TWSN.net. I just dropped a first round mock draft as well for a post Senior Bowl practice. So you can go check that out on TWSN.net. Anthony, how are you doing tonight? How's your Friday night going?
My Friday night's going good. I'm actually sitting in a Mobile, Alabama hotel room getting ready for tomorrow's game. So if my Wi-Fi cuts out, blame the hotel, but we should be good. It's been a busy week. A lot of interesting things happening in Mobile this week. So we'll see how the mock draft reflects some of that.
Absolutely. So how this works, folks, is the GMs will be in the chat on YouTube. GMs, if you're up, make sure you've got that pick ready and loaded. We'll go 2 minutes here in round 1. They'll put their pick in the chat. Anthony and I will do our best Mel Kiper and Todd McShay arguments. I promise I won't, talk about how this pick is an absolute mistake unless it truly is. Kidding, folks. Randall is going to be our Rich Eisen, Field Yates, kind of a little bit of both. But gentlemen, I think without further ado, we can go ahead and get this kicked off and put the Tennessee Titans on the clock.
Let's get this party started. Let's enter this draft. All right. Tennessee Titans, a.k.a. Iron City Film. You are on the clock.
There he is. He is on the clock. So, Anthony, where do you think Tennessee goes here at pick 1?
Well, if we're doing where I think they will go, I do feel like quarterback is in the cards. It feels like the Titans are doing their due diligence on Cam Ward and Shedeur. It feels like they want to commit fully to the change. Will Levis isn't the guy. So I believe it will be one of Shedeur or Cam Ward. If it were my choice, I would take Abdul Carter. I think he's a top 2 player at one of the most important positions in football. So that's where I'd go. But I do believe it will be a quarterback, but we will see what our GM decides is the best option.
Right. No, I'm going to agree with you while we take a look and see what's going on. But I agree with you. I think it probably will be a quarterback. But for the sake of the conversation, I realistically think that Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter is probably the pick. With Borgonzi's comment about a generational prospect, if they think Cam or Shadur is generational, I have some strong concerns about their entire scouting process. But that's neither here nor there. I've said for some time Abdul Carter is the number 1 overall pick in this class. Travis Hunter can do a lot playing corner and wide receiver at a high level, but he can't impact the game a way Abdul Carter can as an edge rusher. The way he gets after the quarterback, gets around left tackles, gets around offensive linemen in general. Yeah, there is going to be some size concerns if he's trying to set the edge and run defense. Yes, but at the same time, Micah Parsons had those same concerns, and he ended up just fine. So I think if you're a GM and you're looking to take Abdul Carter, you have to basically say this is the best player in this class. This is a blue chip prospect, and picking at number 1, you got to take him.
Okay.
And also having a defensive line of Abdul Carter, Simmons, Sweat, and Harold Landry. I mean, that is a menacing front 4. So,
all right, here we go. Pick 1 is in.
And Abdul Carter is the selection. I think that's probably the smart selection. I think that's, I think that's the right pick. If you're Tennessee, is a quarterback probably more likely and probably a higher pick for them? Yeah, sure. But I think you have to take the best guy available. And here's the thing. I don't think Levis was bad per se, but the question becomes, is Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders going to be an upgrade over what you have for Will Levis, right? And I'm not confident, and I love Cam Ward and I love Shadur Sanders. I think they're both round 1 guys. I am just not. I love the sound. We're on the clock here. But I'm not confident that they would be an upgrade over Will Levis today in a year. Yeah, sure. But I think the conversation becomes if you take Ward for Levis, right? Cam Ward at that point says, it's the same style as Levis, but enough rattling on about that. It looks like the next pick is in for the Cleveland Browns, and it was Travis Hunter, the wide receiver and corner out of Colorado. Anthony, how do you feel about the corner wide receiver prospect making his way to Cleveland?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty similar conversation to what we just did with the Titans, where certainly a quarterback could be in the mix just based on how poor the position is for them right now. But I think Cleveland, even more so than the Titans and the team picking right now, the Giants, they just feel like they just need talented football players. And at this point, with Abdul off the board, I think Travis Hunter is the most talented football player that they could get. If he does go to Cleveland, you kind of then wonder, well, will he be a corner? Will he be a wide receiver? I've always said he should be a corner first, and then you can use him as a wide receiver in certain packages, certain plays that you could specifically dial up. Maybe he is a full-time receiver, so we'll see. And now we've got our first quarterback off the board with Mr. Cam Ward going to the Giants, which I'm sure Brian Dable, at the very least, would be very happy with.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if this ended up the Giants' way, they're like a kid in a candy store having their choice of both quarterbacks, of Ward or Sanders. And I think Cam Ward just fits what Dable wants to do a little bit better. He has a little bit better arm talent that he can use Neighbors a little bit better for, and just overall be able to push the ball down the field a little bit more than Sanders can. It looks like the pick is in again here, and the New England Patriots going Will Campbell, the offensive tackle out of LSU. Listen, folks, I've made no secret about how I feel about Will Campbell. I think he's a guard at the next level. I'm not sold on his prospects at the left tackle position. There's some concerns with his leverage and his footwork and handling outside speed rushers, but New England and Mike Vrabel do not share those same concerns. So I would not be shocked to see him go 4th overall. But ultimately, I think if you're taking him here, it's as a premier left tackle prospect, which I don't see. But Anthony, how do you feel about Will Campbell going 4th here to New England?
Yeah, it's similar to you. I think he's a guard at the next level, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for New England. They can use offensive line help just across the board. I do feel like this is a little early for me because I think Will Campbell's a guard. If you're going to go offensive line, assuming medicals check out, I probably would have gone Josh Simmons. But nevertheless, Will Campbell fills an immediate need, so you can't really hate on the pick too much. And Jacksonville following up with who I think is the only other blue chip player in this class besides Hunter and Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, immediately an impact player along that defensive line. And in this scenario, I mentioned how the Titans defensive line instantly becomes a menacing front four. Jacksonville quickly following suit with Mason Graham next to Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker, a frightening combination.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I know that there's some Jaguar fans out there that want cornerback here instead of Mason Graham. I don't think that's the wrong decision, but I after reviewing the tape on Will Johnson, I have some concerns about his speed, and I have some concerns obviously about his injury, whether he'll be able to go, things like that. So I think Mason Graham, like you said, he's a blue chip prospect here. This is a guy that you take and slots in the middle of your defense. And the Raiders now on the clock, and they go Shadur Sanders, the quarterback from Colorado, second QB off the board. Listen, Pete Carroll in Las Vegas taking over. He is not in love with AOC. He's not in love with Gardner Minshew. So he goes and gets Shadur Sanders, who's been connected to Tom Brady. So obviously there's that connection there. I think this is a good fit for him. But ultimately, time's going to tell how he fits into Pete Carroll's offense. But with that said, the Jets are on the clock. And Anthony, I am going to turn the floor over to you to pick for New York. Where are we going with Aaron Glenn's first pick?
Yeah, so this is actually a pretty interesting scenario for the Jets. In a world where 2 quarterbacks actually did go in the top 6, they have a pick of a few premium players. I made the point today, and I'm gonna make this pick here so I can make the point again. I think, knowing Aaron Glenn and knowing where he just came from in Detroit, he's going to want to build through the offensive line and the defensive line. And with that in mind, I'm going to take Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M because in my world, he can be, they're not the same player exactly, but he can be what Aiden Hutchinson was for the Lions, in my opinion. I think he can bring you that elite edge rusher. The Jets have not had an elite edge rusher in a very long time. And listen, Will McDonald's had moments this year. Jermaine Johnson is decent when he can stay on the field, but they still just do not have a premium edge. You have Quinnen in the middle, and certainly I would like somebody next to him. But I think if you add Shamar Stewart, you're immediately showing that this is going to be a team that's focused on winning in the trenches. And there's other positions of need that I think you can worry about in the later picks. So Shamar Stewart, give me the guy that I think has maybe the highest ceiling of any player in this draft.
Agreed.
Wow. So I like Stewart. I don't know if I like him that much. I'm going to ask the question because it's been thrown around a lot, obviously, with the Senior Bowl. Is there any sort of thought to potentially considering a guy like Mike Green or James Pierce here at 7 for the Jets?
There certainly is. I like Pierce more than Green at this point. I think the issue I would run into is it feels like the Jets are going to be more, of a 4-3 front with Aaron Glenn now. And that's not to say like you couldn't find a place for a Pierce or a Green, but it does feel like they're going to want size on the defensive line at the edge spot. I just think Shamar Stewart is like pretty clearly the best big defensive end that we're gonna see in the first round. So that's where I'd be with that. If this pick was a James Pierce or a Mike Green, I wouldn't hate it. I would have some questions about the long-term fit because they also feel similar to like Will McDonald and to other guys that we have on the roster, where Shamar Stewart just feels like a one-of-one freak of nature.
Yep, absolutely. So obviously I'm going to throw another Jets kind of caveat at you. If the board falls this way, 2 quarterbacks go in the top 6 and you're sitting there at 7 with the Jets, is it Shamar Stewart or are you trading down and trying to maybe get a little bit lower and maybe go potentially quarterback in the teens, maybe if you get that far?
I always love the idea of trading down. I'm never going to be against trading down. The problem I think is finding someone who wants to trade up. And I think really the only option I think would be if a team wants to like move up for Ashton Jainty or Tedero McMillan, because they feel like guys that are kind of a cut above everybody else in their position group. But even that, I feel like it will be hard trade partner. And it looks like we've got the Panthers pick now. Jalen Walker, who is listed as a linebacker here, but in this scenario, it feels like he'll be more of an edge player for a Panthers defense that is desperate for some pass rush.
Yeah, no, you're spot on there. I think Jalen Walker is going to be one of those guys in Canales' defense that, hey, just go get after the quarterback, just rush the passer. And they could certainly drop him into coverage. It's not like he can't do it athletically. He can certainly move sideline to sideline, but I think his money is going to be made as a pass rusher in the NFL. And with that, the Saints are on the clock. And Anthony, I know I just let you talk about the Jets pick, but you're back on the clock for New Orleans. And they've got a lot of needs, a lot of holes. They can't even hire a head coach at this point. Mickey Loomis, if you're watching, my DMs are open. I'll send you my LinkedIn resume. I'll take the job. But Anthony, you're on the clock for the Saints. Where are we going for New Orleans?
Yes, I won't take up too much time as I did with the Jets. But I think the popular pick would be an edge player, and I certainly would understand that. I'm actually going to kind of buck the trend a little because I've decided I'm just going to pick who I want for this draft. I'm going to go Josh Simmons here. I'm going to take Josh Simmons.
Ooh.
I think Josh Simmons is the number 1 tackle in this class at this point. I'm a huge Talisi Fuaga fan. I think he's great. I think he belongs on the right side. And Penning is just not up to snuff for me. So I think you take Simmons, you put Fuaga back on the right where he fits better, and Josh Simmons can be your left tackle of the future for whoever winds up being quarterback, whether that's Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, insert player here. But either way, I think Josh Simmons, assuming medicals check out, he had the best tackle tape this year in his limited action. And I think New Orleans would really like having him there.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I agree with you. I also have him as tackle 1, but more O-line number 3 behind Campbell and Savanea, just because I'm a Savanea truther. But I think you're right. If his medicals checked out, this is a guy that would have been top 5 in this draft, probably going number 4 overall to New England. Mm-hmm. He has just such a clean tackle tape, right? In pass protection and run blocking, he can do it all. The concern is those medicals, with the issues. It's a patella issue, ACL issue. What we've never really gotten the true story behind it. And his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, is not helping things, just saying, hey, he'll be ready to go for camp. He'll be ready to go for camp. That's kind of the story we keep getting. So there's going to be a lot of mystery and intrigue around him on draft night. But I think we're in a spot now, the Saints at 9, the Bears at 10, the 49ers at 11, that Simmons could find his way coming off the board. So I 100% think that this is a really good pick, because if you're the Saints, you just need cheap, solid talent. And that's the only way you're going to get out of the cap hell that they've created for themselves, is to get cheap, solid talent for them. And Parker coming in with my, pronunciation changes, folks. We're doing it live. All right, we're going live. We're having fun with it. But no, I think if you're Mickey Loomis, that's what you got to do. You just got to get cheap talent. You got to get better talent overall. And the Bears on the clock now here at pick number 10, and their pick is in, and it's Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State. Look, Ben Johnson, he loves 2 running back scenarios. And even, when he had DeAndre Swift previously, he was not sold on DeAndre Swift as a sole running back. So I think as much as the Bears need offensive linemen, I think you can get around that by getting a good running game, and Ashton Jeanty will give you that. But Anthony, how do you feel about the Boise State runner making his way to Chicago?
Yeah, I feel very similar to you. And look, Ashton Jeanty is top 5 on my board. So it certainly makes sense from a, talent perspective. Like you said, Ben Johnson loves his running backs. It is a little ironic that another running back is going to replace DeAndre Swift in a Ben Johnson offense. But yeah, I do think like offensive line is obviously the biggest concern for this team. You can find day 2 talent on the offensive line, particularly on the interior, which is probably their biggest issue right now. But there are good guard players that you can get there. So I don't hate it. Take a premier talent like Ashton Jeanty. Totally works for me. And the Niners, rich get richer apparently, because Will Johnson, who talent-wise, if we're basing this draft on 2023 tape, Will Johnson is a top 3 player in this draft, easy. Full of medical questions this season, but when he was on the field, still was an impact player. I believe he had 2 pick sixes. So it's still, there's clearly talent there. You mentioned before, top speed is a bit of a concern. I'm curious to see what his 40 time winds up being, but Niners would love to have a talented player like Will Johnson kind of fix the one part of their defense that I think has kind of faltered the most this season, which is the secondary. So yeah, I like this pick a lot for the Niners.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think this is a guy, the 2 things, and I hit on them earlier, medicals and that 40 time are going to be the most important. And, Jay Vert being the GM, he's got him as a top 5 graded player. I think if the medicals check out and that speed checks out, he's not going to be here at pick 11 for San Francisco. But this is one of those guys that every year we talk about in the draft has that somewhat of a free fall down a board for some reason or another, whether it's, they go on TV and they're in a mask and a bong, sorry, Dolphins fans, or, they just sit in the green room for 3-4 hours on end, sorry, Rodgers fans. Somebody has that tumble down board. And I think this year it could be Will Johnson, because the medical is a question mark. We haven't really heard much of what the actual injury is. So I think there's a chance he could be here for San Francisco, and like it was said, the rich get richer. But Jerry World and Jerry Jones is on the clock. Dallas going Tet McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona, and I've seen varying reports. I've seen some people having Tet as high as number 4 to New England, and I've seen him as low as in the 20s to like Denver. There's a wide variance on Tet McMillan. Some people have him as wide receiver 1. I've got him as wide receiver 2. He lives in contested catch scenarios, which is great because he has long arms and long frame, but it's also concerning because I don't see the separation that I would like to see from a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. and he's got a zip code catch radius. He'll catch everything his way. But again, I like my wide receivers to be able to separate and not live in 50-50 ball country. But you'd think with having CeeDee Lamb here, this pick with Ted McMillan just immediately opens him up as well. But Anthony, how do you feel about this one for Dallas?
Yeah, I'm with you. I do have Ted as wide receiver 1, but this is probably the range, sort of like 8 to 12 is kind of where I would want to take him. I do. He's not the greatest separator in the world, but I do feel like you can kind of live with that because of just his size and his ability to make plays down the field. I'm not the first person to make this comp, but I think it's a correct one. Very Drake London-esque kind of guy, kind of player. And for Dallas, I think a really nice compliment for CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, a guy who can move around, play in the slot, play outside, can win at all 3 levels. And Ted can be more of that big body, red zone threat, deep threat kind of guy. So for Dallas, I like this a lot. It does feel like there are bigger needs for Dallas, but the talent is there. I totally get this pick for Dallas. And now as we await Miami,
I got Brock. Oh, sorry. I've got Brock's pick.
Oh, go ahead and put it in.
All right.
And it is Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia. So I'm a little surprised by this one, and I'll admit it, because for me, the Dolphins' offensive line help is huge. So I would have kind of liked to see them go there, but obviously you have Will Campbell, he's off the board. Josh Simmons, he's off the board. So who's that next offensive lineman? Whereas Malachi Starks, for most people, is safety 1. For me, he's safety 2, fighting for that spot. But this is a guy some people have rated as a top 5 selection, and I have no problems with that. But with that, I am now on the clock with Indianapolis. And for the Colts, folks, there's 2 things that they love. They love size and speed, and they love athletic ability. And you've got to get weapons for Anthony Richardson. Indianapolis, we're not going to make meat of it. They're going to go Tyler Warren, tight end, Penn State, 6'6", 265. Has the ability to play multiple positions all over the field, can do a lot of different things for Indianapolis. And he's going to either help Anthony Richardson's development, or if Anthony Richardson doesn't put it together, he's going to be a future weapon for whoever is the next quarterback in Indianapolis. But Tyler Warren for Indy is a slam dunk pick here at pick 14.
Yeah, I got.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who'd you go for? I'm chatting in the draft. I'm chatting in the draft chat. Who'd you go for?
You're fine. Tyler Warren for Indianapolis out of Penn State.
I mean, it's just like that's probably the perfect mesh of a player and a team in this draft, in my opinion.
Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
I agree with you. I think that just like you said too, it fits what Indy needs right now: weapon, size, athleticism, versatility. It checks all the boxes, and I think it's a good value. I think he literally is 14 on my board at this point, so value makes sense. It's just it's perfect in every way. I have no problem with this pick.
No, and with that, I'm back on the clock again here at pick 15 with the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, if I'm the Falcons, I want to try to trade down. I got 4 draft selections in this entire draft, but that's not feasible here. So I'm going to stick it and pick it with Atlanta. I need to get some pass rush. I need pass rush help for this Atlanta team. I'm going with probably one of the best pure pass rushers on the board right now, and a guy who has a first-round grade for me from Tennessee. It's James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher. Listen, there's concerns about him being able to set the edge in run defense. I get that. You can teach that. You cannot teach his athletic ability for rushing the passer, and that's exactly what Atlanta needs here at pick 15. And the cool part is I'm back on the clock again at pick 16. I just went back to back to back. Like I'm, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes trying to do in a couple of weeks, go back to back to back. I released a mock draft over at twsn.net today, a Senior Bowl, post Senior Bowl practice mock draft, 32, first round selections. I'm going to stick with the selection that I made in that mock draft, and this one's going to be a little shocking for some folks. It's defensive tackle Alfred Collins from the University of Texas. He is hands down the best run defender in this entire defensive tackle group. Pass rush wise, there's still a little bit of development needed, right? But he's got the length, he's got the size, he's got the athletic ability, and he sits right in the middle of Jonathan Gannon's defense and just eats up gaps and blocks. So Alfred Collins here to Arizona. But with those 3 picks, Anthony, feel free. How do you think I did on just those 3 runs?
Yeah, I'll give you a review here. So, like I said, I love the Tyler Warren pick. Makes all the sense in the world. James Pierce Jr., great pick too. Certainly makes a ton of sense. I do wonder how he fits in the Ulbrich defense, but I can see the vision. And I actually don't even think I thought he actually did surprisingly well at setting the edge at Tennessee this year for a guy his size. Certainly can use some improvement, but I do think he actually is better than I think some people would give him credit for. Alfred Collins, I'm actually going to be one of the people that's not going to be stunned with this pick, even though clearly some people in the chat are. But I think he is uber talented. I think he's a fantastic run defender. He gives you so much athleticism. Kind of needs to develop as a pass rusher, a little more, of a plan as a pass rusher, an ability to push the pocket, but the tools are there. And you put him in Arizona, I think that's a nice fit. So I don't hate the Alfred Collins pick. I probably would have not necessarily made it, but I think there's a logic to it, and I respect it. So, and now we've got the Bengals going with Tyler Booker, which is another pick that I think makes all the sense in the world. It feels like every year the Bengals need offensive line help. Mm-hmm. Tyler Booker, I think, is the best guard in this draft. Pure guard. We can talk about who's going to shift inside and who's not, but pure guard players. Tyler Booker's number 1, immediate starter for Cincinnati, and I think has that all-pro potential with just the ability to. He just moves people, and that may seem very simple analysis, but he is a people mover. But he's also a good pass blocker, and Cincinnati, particularly their rushing attack, would love to have him. And the hits keep coming because we got another offensive lineman with one Mr. Kelvin Banks.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
there we go.
Technical difficulties. There it is.
Not just my face.
So looks like Seattle goes Kelvin Banks out of Texas, and I'm not sold on Kelvin Banks as an offensive lineman, an offensive tackle in the NFL. There's some concerns about him moving side to side laterally that I have, and his feet sometimes feel like they're moving in quicksand. But I get the need for offensive line help for Seattle, 100%. You have guys that definitely need help inside. Are your tackles set? But this is kind of a take him for a competition level pick. And it's understandable here. I know some people have talked about him as a top 10 guy. I'm not a big fan of it, but I can understand it. With that said, Tampa Bay is on the clock, and Randall, I believe Tampa Bay is you. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it is me. So Sean took him as a guard, for clarification on that pick. All right, let's talk through this this Bucks pick. What are we looking at here? We could use our wide receivers are getting old. Defense can help. What are you guys feeling on these top lists that you're looking at for the Bucks? I feel Luther Burden would be a lot of fun. Nick Scourton could be one coming around there.
I think Burden is a little bit fun. I think if you're Tampa Bay, I think you need a lockdown corner at either corner spot. Those corners are no better than burnt toast at this point. I've seen subway turnstiles that have prevented more passes than their cornerback room, and that's sad to say. I would go with Savon Revel from ECU would be my selection. If we're looking here, yes, I know you have the injury concerns about him, but I think that's where I would go with the pick. Anthony, what do you think the Buccaneers would have done?
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I do think corner is a need at this point. I do feel like edge is also still very much a need, but at this point, I don't really love the edge options. I mean, I guess Michael Williams would be the one I would take here. But you can get a good edge rusher in the second round and worry about that. I think there is going to be a bit of a corner drop-off coming soon. And Savon Revel is another one. The medicals are kind of the big question mark with him at this point. But if that checks out, he was a guy that would be undoubtedly going, top 20. So I like, he's tall, he's athletic, he's probably an immediate starter for them. I like this pick a lot for Tampa.
Absolutely. So Denver's on the clock now, and Denver's got some needs at running back, wide receiver, even tight end, so offensive skill positions to kind of help support Bo Nix, which was a very big surprise for him in his first year at Denver. I don't think he's, I don't think there's enough weaponry around him, and I think obviously if Ashton Genty gets past Chicago at 10, this is his floor here at 20, but I think Denver's probably looking at a wide receiver or a tight end, and the pick is in, and it's tight end. It's Colston Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan. I am not as high on him as I am some other tight ends, and I say that with him being my tight end 3 after Tyler Warren and Gunnar Helm out of Texas. But I still think it's a really good pick. It gives Bo Nix a security blanket. Anthony, how do you feel about the Denver Broncos selection?
Yeah, I think this makes all the sense in the world, and I do think this is maybe a touch high for him, but I don't mind him falling to this spot. I think Sean Payton loves having a good tight end as a weapon. Certainly, it helps a young quarterback, and like you said, they just need weapons. They just need pass catchers at this point. So I totally think this is a solid pick. And the Steelers, in a similar vein, also going with pass catcher, they take Emeka Egbuka, who at this point is my wide receiver 2. And I've talked about it before. I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers make this pick solely just based on their history of just not taking wide receivers in the first round. They prefer to find wide receivers later on. But me personally, I think this is a perfectly fine pick. I think like I said, he's my wide receiver 2. I think he's a nice complement to George Pickens, who is more of that deep threat one-on-one guy. Emeka Egbuka, people have described him as a power slot, which kind of means he can be a versatile lineup across formations and win one-on-one matchups at different parts of the field. I think he's exceedingly underrated at this point. So I like this pick a lot for the Steelers here as we await Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers selection.
All right. Well, Jim Harbaugh is going to keep with getting him some more weapons. I'd consider Loveland. I would consider Loveland or Fannin potentially in the tight end department because Jim loves his tight ends. But I think I'm looking at Alec Iomanner over there to help out Ladd McConkey, bigger guy, stretch the field, help out Ladd in the intermediate. Let's go Alec Iomanner to the Chargers at 22.
So I'm going to tell you this. I love the pick. I'm an Alec Iomanner guy. I think he's got the size, the speed, the hands. He's got a little bit of everything. Obviously on the younger side, a redshirt sophomore. This is a guy that's going to start rising up draft boards. I was disappointed that I didn't get to see him at the Senior Bowl because I think he was going to show up there and show out. But I am Gonna note it as we wait for the Packers pick, whoever that selection is. I believe it's Newt that's on the clock. Is anyone surprised by the fall of Luther Burden right now? Anthony, are you shocked by how far he's fallen currently?
So I'm lower on Luther Burden than I think the consensus is. I think he is a second round talent, and I recognize that that's probably me partially blaming blaming him instead of blaming the Missouri offense, which I would be the first to admit was just horrific, and it was not his fault. But I do have questions just about what exactly his ceiling is at the next level. But he is a very talented player, so I from that perspective, I'm a little surprised. But this is taking Io Manor over Burden is a little bit of a surprising one to me. But Michael Williams goes to the Packers here. I talked about him a little bit before. He has not had the best season. Didn't deliver the production that I think people were hoping for, especially Georgia fans. But in terms of physical traits, in terms of the size and the length that you look for, the potential, it's all there. This is he feels like a Packers defensive lineman. So I think from that perspective, it makes sense. He'll fit what they want to do on defense. And they do need, I think, some help. They could use some help with pass rushing. So I don't hate this pick. But Bill, what do you make of this?
No, I think it's a good pick. He's my edge rusher 5 on my big board right now, and he's the first of the non-first rounded graded guys because he reminds me a lot of Leonard Floyd. This is a guy that's got a very high ceiling, probably one of the biggest boomer bust prospects in this entire edge class, even more so than like a Mike Green, because he's got the ceiling and he's a big guy, right? A bigger guy, very athletic. He just hasn't found a way to put it all together yet. And I think him going to Green Bay is going to give him that ability to put it together. I don't see him, if he ends up in Green Bay, I don't see him as a bust in the NFL. Now, will he ever reach that ceiling? That's the big question mark. But I think it's a great pick for the Green Bay Packers here. Minnesota's on the clock now, and the Vikings, we say it 74 times in a draft cycle for the last 10 years, but they need a cornerback, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stephon Gilmore's potentially talking about retirement. They could look safety as well, with Harrison Smith potentially talking retirement. If I'm Minnesota, I would try to fill both needs in one go and go Jahdae Barron, have him play as corner or safety. But Anthony, what do you think Minnesota does here?
I like a lot of what you just said. I think corner makes a ton of sense. I think Jahdae Barron makes a ton of sense. Maybe a touch high based just where I have him on my board. But I do think he fits. I think he fits what they want to do defensively. Brian Flores would like having a player like him to work with and coach up. So I certainly wouldn't hate a Jahdae Barron pick. Similarly, this could be like Ben Morrison, another corner, but it is in fact Jahdae Barron and you listed it again, the versatility he brings you, the stickiness that he has in man coverage. He's undersized, but he plays bigger than I think he actually is, and you have to respect that. So I think this is a solid pickup for the Vikings here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And with that, Houston's on the clock, and there's two schools of thought here. If you're Houston, you either go with an interior offensive line that needs help, or you go with Luther Burden and you stop his free fall. I think this would be his absolute floor. And while we wait for the GM for the Texans, I think if I'm the Texans here, I'm having an internal debate on if I want to bypass offensive line in the first round and go Burden. I think probably do need to go him just because I think you can get a guard in the second or the third round. But Anthony, what are you thinking Texans do here?
This just has to be offensive line, right? Like, is there really any other option? I mean, I guess you could go receiver. I guess you could go like defensive line, but well, okay, I guess you can go receiver. You could go Luther Burden. I'm so good. No, listen, I would have gone offensive line. I think there were guys here that I would have taken that filled the biggest need on this team, but we talked about it. Luther Burden is a very talented wide receiver. For some, he is still wide receiver one, and deserves to go a lot higher than this. I think he brings, if he goes to the Texans, it's actually pretty interesting, and it's not. I haven't seen him mocked to Houston, I don't think, but it's an interesting fit with Nico Collins. We don't know. We're hoping that Tank Dell comes back and plays like he was playing before the horrible injury, but we don't know what he's going to be health wise. So giving you that dynamic playmaker, I think it's an interesting pick for Houston, but they need to go offensive line sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think Luther Burden's been mocked here is because I don't think he had fall. I don't think he would fall that far, but I mean, it's certainly possible. There's teams, the Chargers could use wide receiver, but do they want to go with another Lad McConkey size guy, or do they want that big target that they thought Quentin Johnson was supposed to be? But I think if the Texans get him here, I think it has to be a steal. And the Rams are on the clock. And I think if you're the Rams, you look at corner, you look at left tackle. It looks like the pick is in. It's Ben Morrison, the corner from Notre Dame. I love this pick because I think if he were healthy, he's probably competing for corner 2, and that's Travis Hunter being corner 1 with Will Johnson and a top 10 or 15 selection. So I think getting Ben Morrison here at pick 26 is excellent value. I just would be concerned about the medicals and what those look like, but this is a guy who's very sticky in man coverage, has the ball hawk instincts that you look for. But Anthony, what do you think about Ben Morrison from the Rams here?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to what I said earlier about Savon Ravel, where if the medicals check out, this is a top 15 player just based on talent, based on the film that he put out in 2023. He's just so smooth, so fluid in coverage. It really just it's alarming that he suffered a season-ending hip injury, and that is so so crucial for a corner whose focus is bending his hips, being able to turn and be smooth in coverage. So again, if he does check the medical boxes, I think this is great value for LA, fills a position of need for them. This is a great pick as we now await the Baltimore Ravens. Could potentially get Lamar Jackson some help, could potentially go defense. We'll see what we've got here. As this user says,
Bill, this is you. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's Teapot mixed with me. I think we're kind of being a universal kind of one for one. I agree with Teapot. It's Jonas Avenea. You're talking about not being able to get Ronley Stanley back on a team friendly deal. Patrick McCarry could be gone, and you're going to need a guy who can play multiple O-line positions, and Sabanea can do that for you. He's one of those guys that you would take and say, hey, put the best 5 guys in front of Lamar Jackson to block, and that's what that pick would be. And I have a first-round grade on him, and I thought he was going to go significantly higher than this. So to get him here at 27 is an excellent pick. Lions on the clock now here at 28.
That'd be Drew
is going to be for the Lions, and if I'm the Lions, there's a few spots that I would want to go. I would say somewhere along the interior of that offensive line, guard, center, or both, or potentially a running mate for Aiden Hutchinson. Anthony, what do you think the Lions end up doing here?
Yeah, I'm with you. The offensive line or Aiden Hutchinson running mate. and that is indeed the pick with Mike Green from Marshall. You want to talk about guys that have had a good Senior Bowl week? Look no further than Mike Green. Just balled out. He had a good week from the weigh-in, weighing in at 251 pounds, which dissuaded my concerns about his playing weight / playing strength. And then he put that strength on display, notably in Josh Connerly's chest, running over the guy who some feel is offensive tackle 1 in this class. Balled out every day that he was there, rightfully made the decision to leave early. And at this point, a lot of people think Mike Green could go earlier than this. And I get it. This is about the range I would take him. I'm still not totally there like some people are, but great pick for the Lions here as we get 29, another very talented defensive player who's had a pretty good Senior Bowl week. Bill, the Walter Nolan goes to the Commanders.
Yeah, so going back to Mike Green real quick, I on my mock draft on twsn.net, I had him number 8th overall to the Panthers, and people have been talking about him as a top 10 prospect, and you can see it with his pass rushing ability. But I also have seen folks at the end of the first round. He just feels like a Dan Campbell guy. He feels like a bite your kneecaps kind of guy, especially with the rep that he had against Connerly, where he ran with some pure hatred in his heart through that man's chest. And I feel like giving Dan Campbell that type of an edge rusher would leave nightmares for the NFC North. But Walter Nolan to the Commanders is kind of a curious pick for me. When he's on and his motor's going, he's a very good, talented player. But his motor runs really hot and cold. I've seen a lot of up and down play from him, and I'd like to see more consistency from him. Obviously, there are character question marks and effort question marks for him as well, just because of that hot and cold play. But I think when he's on, he's probably one of the best 3 or 4 defensive tackles in this class. But it's when he's on. And I think him going to Washington to work with Dan Quinn would be a great fit for him. I think that would be an excellent spot for him to go. But Buffalo here on the clock now, and obviously our lovely moderator, Randall, has a nice invested interest in Buffalo, and our lovely moderator Jim, who's driving back from Mobile, has a beautiful interest in where Buffalo goes as well. And Vincent DeStefano, probably butchered his name, is picking for the Buffalo Bills. I would think that
he did such a good job.
Yeah, goes Kenneth Grant, and we go back-to-back big bodies here on Friday night, right? Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle out of Michigan, a guy that I like, probably a little bit more than I probably should. My comp for him is Dontari Poe when he came out of Kansas City, that big, athletic, moves people out of the way type of guy. So I think it's a good pick. But Anthony, how do you feel about it? Having to go up against him in the AFC East twice a year now.
Yeah, well, as a Jets fan, I hate this pick. It's the worst pick that could have been made. No, I do think this is a very good pick for Buffalo. I sort of think Kenneth Grant is like kind of being underrated ? Like I feel like he is a uber talented 300. I think he's like 339 pounds, something like that. Mm-hmm. But he moves like a guy who's like 15, 20 pounds lighter. And I think a lot of what I feel like people don't realize or just don't acknowledge is Mason Graham, and I'm not taking anything away from Mason Graham. I think he's a fantastic player too, but Kenneth Grant was eating a lot of double teams while Mason Graham was wrecking, one-on-one blockers. So if you are able to get Kenneth Grant in one-on-one situations, I think he could be a pretty dominant force in the interior. But it looks like the Eagles have made their selection, and it's Mr. Jahad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama, who I love. I hate that he's going to the Eagles because they get another amazing defensive football player that fell to them for some reason. But Jihad Campbell is, I think, for most people, and Bill, you can tell me if you disagree, but I think he's linebacker one for just about everybody, I guess, unless you consider Jalen Walker linebacker. But Jihad Campbell is just so big and strong, but also so rangy for a player his size. Also just very smart. And he does give you a bit of an upside as an edge rusher. I don't think he's going to be like a full-time edge, but certainly in some situations he can be an edge rushing player. So I love this pick for the Eagles, and the Chiefs also getting a very talented player in Josh Connerly, despite his Mike Green experience. Still a great pick for them. Bill, if you want to weigh in on these last two picks here.
Yeah, no, so I agree with you. I have Jalen Walker rated as a linebacker, so he's linebacker 1, making Campbell linebacker 2, but he's up there. This is a guy who does a lot of really good things for you in the pass game, does a lot of good things for you in run defense. My comp for him is Deion Jones if he were on performance-enhancing drugs, is kind of how I would compare Jihad Campbell. So I think Philly, I would have liked to see them go edge, but I am not I'm not against a linebacker. Like Durst mentioned, the Eagles typically don't value linebackers very much, but I think they're going to find it hard to go away from Jihad Campbell when he tests like a freak. And there's a high chance he may not be here at pick 31 come April. And then the Chiefs go Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon. Recovered very well from the Mike Green experience that you talked about. I know there's some folks, Parker being one of them, not as high on Connerly as the field. There's some anchor concerns, but I think he's a very athletic tackle. I think this is a guy that between him and Kingsley Suamatatia, you have to figure out Patrick Mahomes' blind side. Somebody's got to figure it out. And I think between those two, it's got to be one of those two, or we just continue to throw darts at the wall. But with that, that's the end of round 1, folks. So we appreciate you sticking around for round 1. Had a really great show. First things first, before we recap the picks here, make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, you like the video, share the video, make sure you subscribe to the NFL Draft Fanatic Draft Professor YouTube channel. Turn on that notification bell so you get notified anytime we go live with NFL draft content. Make sure that you follow our lovely moderator over on X and on Blue Sky. It's at Randall Slifer on X. My lovely co-host, Anthony_Russo97 over on X. You can find me on X as well, at Spark Scouting, as well as over at the Right Way Sports Network. That's TWSN.net. Randall, you want to run back through those first 32 picks for us real quick?
Let's hit it, and then just tell me when to stop if you see something that you want to point out. But we're looking at, for the Titans, Abdul Carter, Penn State. We got Browns, got Travis Hunter, Colorado. We got the Giants getting Cam Ward from Miami. We got the Patriots taking Will Campbell for LSU. We got Jacksonville Jaguars going Mason Graham from Michigan. We got the Raiders taking Shedeur Sanders in Colorado. We got a small surprise in Shamar Stewart going top 7 for Texas A&M edge. We've got Jalen Walker going to Carolina from Georgia. We've got Josh Simmons from Ohio State going to New Orleans Saints. We've got good old Ashton Gianti, Boise State, going to Chicago. We've got Will Johnson from Michigan going to San Francisco 49ers. We got big old 6'5" Tet helping out CD over in Dallas from Arizona. We've got Malachi Starks from Georgia helping that safety room, getting rid of Jordan Poyer for the Dolphins. We have Tyler Warren at pick 14 from Penn State to Indianapolis. We have James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee, edge going over to Atlanta. We got another surprise jump at pick 16 with Alfred Collins from Texas, whom I love, and I think with 16 is fair, going to the Cardinals. We've got Tyler Booker, guard from Alabama, going over to Cincinnati to help that line. We've got Calvin Banks going over to Seattle, help that run game from Texas. We've got Siobhan Ravel Jr. from ECU going to Tampa Bay. We have Colston Loveland from Michigan going over to Denver. We have Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State going over to Pittsburgh. We have Alec Iomanner from Stanford, the Canadian, heading over to LA Chargers. We have Michael Williams from Georgia going over to Green Bay. We've got Jade Barron from Texas going over to Minnesota. We've got Luther Burden from Missouri going over to the Houston Texans, replace probably Stephon Diggs. We've got Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame going to the LA Rams. And we got Jonah Savanea from Arizona going to the I'd lost it. There we go. Going over to the Baltimore Ravens. Pick 28, we have the Detroit Lions taking Mike Green from Marshall. Pick 29, we're going Walter Nolan from Ole Miss going to the Commanders. The good old Buffalo Bills took Kenneth Grant from Michigan. We have Jihad Campbell going over to Philadelphia from Alabama. And we got Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon going to the Kansas City Chiefs, which makes a whole bunch of sense. I'm loving these picks. How do you guys feel about round one?
So I'll kick it off. I think the biggest surprise was how far Luther Burden fell, right? This is a guy, I have him as wide receiver 1 on my big board. I know some people have him as wide receiver 2, some as wide receiver 3, but I think him falling all the way to Houston, I think was pretty shocking, especially considering you look at the teams, ahead, like Sean Payton in Denver, it could use a wide receiver there. The Chargers obviously could use a wide receiver, but do you want the same body style as Lad McConkey? But I think that's probably the biggest shocking one. I'm not shocked by Alfred Collins, but other people might say that. But Anthony, what do you think the most shocking pick of round one was here?
I think sort of similar. I think a lot of talented defensive players have fallen farther than I would take them and where I think they'll wind up. I'm a big Walter Nolan guy. I think Jihad, I talked about him, but I think he's easily could go top 20. And it speaks to, I think, more than anything else, just how talented this defensive class is, particularly the defensive line and sort of the linebacker class, but really just the defensive line is just so talented. And I was just looking at my stack of edge and defensive interior defensive line players that are still left. And I mean, we've got so many talented names still on the board that easily could be argued as first round players. Guys like Ezaraku, guys like Scorton, guys like Uman Mielen, Tyleek Williams. There's a lot of defensive talent that is still left, and teams that need defensive line help that are going to be very happy to get these guys in the next coming picks here. So Cleveland now on the clock.
All right, I'm waiting. Oh, sorry. I'm waiting for Christian to respond back, but I do want to shout out an appreciation for everybody that is in the chat. You guys are killing it, doing a bunch of stuff and chiming in on almost every pick. This is so much fun to be able to have a roundtable discussion with 15 to 25 people and with 2 people on camera, 3 people on camera. I'm loving it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Anthony hit the nail on the head. This class is going to be a class where probably from picks 20 to 60, you're going to see a lot of very talented guys go just because they're going to fall out of that first round. There's only so many first round talents that you can take. But the Browns on the clock here at pick 33, and they go Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end from Bowling Green. Listen, I'm going to give you the analysis, and I'm going to give you the Browns analysis, and they're going to line up, and it's yes, both. I think the Browns want to run a lot more 12 personnel, so they're going to need a second tight end next to Njoku. They want to run a lot more, wide zone running scheme, so you can use Fannin as a fullback. I know that the quarterback is a conversational piece, but I think with the way the board's fallen, you can come back in round 3, and if you want to get that there, you can. But I think very good pick. I know some folks had some concerns with him down in Mobile about how stiff he looked and how, after the first day he looked a little rough, but he definitely turned it around, definitely opened some eyes. And I think it's a very good pick here for the Cleveland Browns. Giants on the clock now. They went Cam Ward in round 1. They went quarterback. I would think that they would probably need to get some sort of a weapon to support that quarterback. What do you think they do here, Anthony?
Yeah, I think I think weapon makes a lot of sense. I mean, Malik Neighbors has obviously been fantastic, but need other pass catchers for Cam Ward. I think offensive line is on the table. I think corner is on the table, but it's none of those. It is Nicky Monwari, the
Ooh.
safety linebacker hybrid, kind of just do it all sort of defensive player. And this is
6'3".
a fascinating pick for the Giants. And I don't necessarily hate it. I think he, like I said, sort of a jack of all trades, can drop back in coverage, can play in the box. I want to say he's like 6'3", 227 in that range. So he's just such a big body, but you watching him play last year, you're surprised at how fluid he moves for a guy that big in coverage. And he's he's not a lockdown guy by any means, but he'll be a dynamic player. I think it'll remind people a little bit of Jabril Peppers. I think Iman Ward is even bigger than Jabril Peppers was, but that sort of similar kind of Swiss Army knife sort of defensive player. So this is an interesting pick. I don't hate it. I do think there were other needs I would have addressed first, but this is an interesting pick for them. So,
All right.
Bill, what do you think of that?
Yeah. So while we get some of these other picks that come in, I think I'm with you in that there are other needs that the Giants have. But when you have a guy, when I talked about Starks earlier, how he was kind of competing for safety too, he was competing with Nick Emanwari, and I've had Emanwari potentially as a first round prospect going to teams like Seattle that need safety help. He is just an Avengers level threat as an athlete. This is the kind of guy, when they put the Avengers Initiative together, it was to stop Nick Emanwari. 6'3", 227, super fluid, sideline to sideline, just causes some major issues. And I think overall he's definitely a very good talent to get here at pick 34. I question the fit. Obviously, Giants draft a quarterback first round. You'd want to kind of get him a wide weapon, whether a wide receiver or offensive tackle. But the next two picks are in Tennessee, going Savion Williams, wide receiver out of TCU. Jacksonville going Trey Amos out of Ole Miss as the corner. With Savion, I'm not as high as the consensus, and I will admit that glowingly. He is a day 3 guy for me. I'm just not on the Savion train. Not very polished overall. He's kind of raw. So he has some growing to do, kind of like a Miles Boykin type of receiver for me. But I love the Trey Amos selection for Jacksonville. I think Trey Amos has a potential to be a first round corner. I have the potential for him to go in the end part of the first round. So for Jacksonville to get Mason Graham in round 1 and then turn around and get Trey Amos in round 2, that immediately raises the ceiling for them on defense. But Anthony, how do you feel about Savion and Trey going to the AFC South?
Yeah, very similar with Savion, and I think you and I are both the outliers here, but I'm just not there with him. And look, I see the incredible physical profile, the fantastic athleticism, his ability as a ball carrier. I get it. I see all that. But as just a receiver, I have questions about his route running. I have questions about his ability. He makes several drops. So there's a rawness that it holds me back from loving him. Drew, I'm sorry. I don't want to fight you, but I can't get there with Savion. And I'm with you on the Trey Amos pick too. I think that's a solid pick. Maybe a little high for me, but I like with Mason Graham. I think it makes a ton of sense. You've now addressed, I think, the two biggest needs on defense. I do wonder, with a new offensive coach in Liam Cohen, if they actually do make 2 defensive choices as their first 2 draft picks. I feel like they are going to want either another receiver with Brian Thomas Jr. or a offensive lineman, because there are some holes up front, and Trevor Lawrence needs help if he's going to salvage what was supposed to be an amazing career. So, that is a little intriguing to me. But in terms of the 2 players that they have, I like what they're doing. So.
Yep, absolutely. And the Raiders going Jaden Higgins, with the next selection. There's been a lot of talk about Tet McMillan going to the Raiders at 6th overall. Obviously, here that didn't happen. Jaden Higgins is in that same mold, kind of a big body guy, contested catches, doesn't have a straight line or an adequate burst. Again, another guy I'm a little bit lower on just because of the separation concerns that I see with him, but I can't fault the Raiders for going with Higgins here. And then the Patriots going Nick Scourton, the edge from Texas A&M. This is a guy, when I did my mock over at twsn.net, I had him going 6th overall to the Cleveland Browns because he's 6'6", 285, has the skill set to be a pass rusher as well as set the edge. The big thing, he doesn't turn 21 until August. He is a youngin'.
Woo.
This guy has a ceiling and a sky-high ceiling to develop, and I think New England here getting Scourton, I think, is an excellent selection for them. I think it's really good value. Anthony, how do you feel about Scourton going here to New England?
Yeah, so this is where I've kind of become comfortable with taking him. I think we sort of oversold him a little bit. I think pretty much everybody has him as a bona fide top 10 pick, and this year he just didn't live up to that. I don't think. I think he looked slow. The additional weight just did not help his performance. So at this point, the Nick Scourton that we've seen now, I think this is a solid place for him. And I'm curious what the fit. I don't know about the fit with Vrabel. That's kind of interesting to me. I don't know how exactly that'll work, but talent-wise, I get it. And Landon Jackson going to the Chicago Bears here. Bill, this may be the player that Bill and I disagree the most on. I think Landon Jackson is a 3rd-round player. I see a guy who just doesn't win with as much explosiveness as I would like. He's a big body. He's long, but he just doesn't have that bend or that burst that I really look for in an edge rusher. And here for Chicago, I get the fit kind of, but this does feel like there are several other edge rushers I would have preferred here. But now here's Bill to tell you why I'm wrong. So go ahead, Bill.
Hey Bill, do you mind if I chime in on this one just for 2 seconds?
Absolutely. You're the Arkansas expert here.
Well, so I was trying to put the Senior Bowl week into context, right? Because every single rep, I'm like, man, sort of thing. So I wonder how his confidence was going into those reps. The last time he was on a field was the bowl game in Missouri when it was snowing, and he did have to go to the hospital to be treated for a neck injury. So I'm curious if that has something to do with his confidence level in the Senior Bowl week and how productive he was during there. And maybe that combine, he can bring up that juice. Bill, go ahead.
Yep. No, so I will admit, going into the Senior Bowl week, I had Landon Jackson as a 1st-round talent. You know, he has the size that you cannot teach. He has the arm length that you cannot teach. Gabe hit on it. He got knocked around a little bit by some of those linemen, but he really had some awesome reps. He slid down my board a bit. And that's not his fault. That's just other guys just rising very well. But I still think this is probably about where he will go. I think this is probably his floor. My comp for him is kind of like an Aiden Hutchinson light. It's kind of like diet Aiden Hutchinson, if you wanted to get real tricky with it. But I think this is a really good fit here. And I think Randall's right. I think the combine's probably going to show off what he can do when we start getting to those drills. But the Saints are on the clock, and Anthony, I believe that is you picking for New Orleans.
Yes, it is. So I sort of talked about it. There are other edge rushers that I like in this range, and we skipped edge rusher last time for the Saints to take Josh Simmons. So at this point, Randall, if you could just click the edge tab to make sure I'm not like missing.
Got you right here. Yeah.
People who are available. I think. Yeah, let's go.
The top.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Princely Umanmielen.
Yeah.
If this were solely based on who I think is the best edge player available, it would probably be Ezeraku. But I do think Umanmielen fits a little more of the New Orleans Saints mold of edge player. Bigger body, bigger frame. He didn't have a great Senior Bowl week. Certainly compared to other edge guys that we've talked about, but I still think this is a guy who gives you just solid bend for a player his size, good violent hands. I think he still is a player that should go in this range, and I wouldn't take the sort of lackluster Senior Bowl performance that much into account. As the Bears get an offensive lineman that they desperately need in Armand Membu, who is very disappointing that we didn't get to see him at the Senior Bowl this week. Apparently was battling a stomach flu. This was a guy who I think people are wanting to possibly put in that tackle one conversation. I was prepared to do so if he had a really good Senior Bowl, but he did not play, so not doing that. But this is a solid pick for the Bears here. Immediately can step in and play on the offensive line for Bears team. Start blocking for Ashton Jainty. I really like that 1-2 combo of Membu and Jainty. But Bill, what do you make of these last couple picks here?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head with the Saints going edge rusher here. Princely Umanmielen's got an NFL ready spin move, and he's gonna make life hell on earth for NFC South offensive tackles. Armand Membu, I am a little bit lower on. I know some folks want to put him in that tackle one conversation. I'm not there yet. He is my offensive line number 10 on my big board. Firmly, this is right about where I would feel comfortable taking Armand Membu. Just because I'm not sold on him as a tackle yet. He is more of a guard for me right now. I know he's got the length to play tackle, but I think he fits better at guard for me. But that's not to say he's not a bad guard either. He's kind of in that Savanea class. Let me rephrase it so that way Parker doesn't get in my mentions and get angry. He is a guy that you could play at tackle or guard. Doesn't really matter. He's one of those take your 5 best offensive linemen and figure out a fit later, is how I'd feel about Membu. But Anthony, you're back on the clock here with the Jets, and you shocked the world with Shamar Stewart in round 1. Are you going to do it again here in round 2?
Well, maybe. I don't think this pick is as shocking. And frankly, I'm kind of shocked he's still here a little bit, unless I missed him and just totally whiffed. But I want to go Xavier Watts, safety from Notre Dame.
Oh, nice.
This is a guy who I have him 13 on my board. Excuse me. He is just so talented when it comes to just playing center field, following a quarterback's eyes, and just finding the finding his way to the football. And I don't even think he like wows you athletically. I don't think he, is any sort of like special physical, specimen of any kind. But I mean, he's got good size, for the position, but he's just smart, good ball skills, makes big plays when you need them to be made. I think, and safety is a position that the Jets have neglected for just way too long. I think like Marcus May was probably like the last safety that the Jets drafted with any sort of high pick. So yeah, Xavier Watts, and I also think Aaron Glenn would love him and love his skill set and love to coach him. So this just feels like a really great pick for the Jets to add some much needed help on their back end. So now the 49ers on the clock again.
Yep. And I'm going to echo everything that you said about Xavier Watts. He is my safety number one, and he is a first round graded guy for me because you can't teach his production as a ball hawk. And this is a guy absolutely that you love, that he can provide you, interceptions from that deep third of the safety. And the 49ers on the clock here going with Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. This is a guy that's made him some money down in Mobile. We were talking going in, probably going to be a day 3 pick. In my last mock that I did over at twsn.net, I had him in the first round to Minnesota as a guard there. The question that I would have as Gray Zabel, as where we would look, is what sort of position do you have him play for the 49ers? Do you have him play a tackle? Do you have him play a guard? Do you have him play a center? Where do you look if you're looking him? And that's how I would see the 49ers kind of playing it out. How do you think they would play Gray Zabel in San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd have to start him on the interior. And it's sort of interesting because, and I don't even think this is a bad pick, but I think the big question with the Niners offensive line is how much longer does Trent Williams have? My best guess is probably 1 or 2 more seasons. But Gray Zabel, I don't see as a guy that is going to be that long-term left tackle. I just don't think he has the frame and the physical tools to be able to play left tackle in the NFL long-term. So I think he's certainly a fine interior blocker for them. But it does still feel like there's a tackle need here long-term. But this is certainly an upgrade for their offensive line as the Cowboys go defensive line, taking Derek Harmon. And this is a pick that I actually was thinking about earlier today because I think one of the things that with new defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus is he loves a good 3-tech, right? So this feels like a pick that will immediately fit the Matt Eberflus defense. Mozzie Smith has been inconsistent, to be generous about it. And as Drew said, I think this is a great value. Harmon probably should have gone about 10 picks ago at least. But this is a great ad for the Cowboys. Matt Eberflus is going to be jumping for joy with this pick. And Derek Harmon can immediately be a pass rush threat alongside Micah Parsons. So this is a really solid pickup for Dallas. Notably, still has not taken a running back yet, but I guess that's a problem for round 3. But Bill, what do you make of Harmon to the Cowboys?
Yeah, so Derek Harmon is my DT3 right now. He reminds me a lot of Rashawn Gary when he was going into Green Bay. Very athletic guy that can do a lot of different things for you. Very good getting after the quarterback, as well as he does need a little work on run defense, but this is a guy who's got a very good ceiling, and I think Dallas needs help defensive tackle wise. I think they swung and missed on Mozzie Smith as much as they don't want to admit it. But I'm up here with the next three. And first off, for Indianapolis, I am going to break Parker Blake's heart, and I'm going to take my guy at cornerback, Azareye'h Thomas, the cornerback from Florida State. Just showed up and showed out at the Senior Bowl. Very athletic, very good in man coverage, long frame. Definitely going to fit it well in Lou Anaramo's defense. And now I'm back on the clock with Atlanta here. And round one, I went edge for them. And round two, I'm going to look in a little bit different of a scenario. I'm going to look at linebacker. I've got an edge guy on that first level. At my second level of defense, I'm going to look at linebacker. And I'm going to go with one of the guys that Clint loves and that I love as well. He's my linebacker 3. Jack Kaiser, the Notre Dame linebacker. I know some people may think this is a little high for Kaiser, but this is a guy who can play all 3 spots at linebacker, left, outside, right outside, and middle linebacker. And putting him in the middle of that defense for Atlanta, I think would be an excellent fit. He is your middle linebacker of the future. And now for Arizona, I'm going to buck the trend here a little bit. I know defensive help is probably where they want to go, but in this scenario, I'm going to get Kyler Murray another weapon. I'm going to get him a weapon that is shockingly still on the board here. I'm surprised that it is. It's wide receiver Xavier Restrepo from Miami. You give Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside, throw Xavier Restrepo in the slot. Kyler Murray now has some offensive weapons. He's, just a shade under, I believe, 5'11", 200 pounds, very stocky. He brings the thunder in a slot role where you typically look for the lightning. But I think Arizona probably targets wide receiver earlier than we might think. And getting Xavier Restrepo here is an excellent selection.
His route running looked good this week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it did. I'm a big Restrepo fan. I think this is a great pick for Arizona. I think it really is sort of, I don't want to say slept on, but I think we can acknowledge that he was a big asset for Cam Ward this past season for Miami. Constantly just a safety net, a guy that was reliable, like Randall alluded to, runs great routes, has solid hands. There's a reason he is the all-time Miami receiving leader with a school that has had incredible receiver talent throughout the years. Dude's just a baller, makes plays when you need him to. And for Arizona, I think he's a really nice fit. And I love Azareye'h Thomas to the Colts too. I think he's, like you said, a great corner for a Lou Anarumo defense, and really another guy that had a solid Senior Bowl week too. Just showed how big and long he is in man coverage. He's such a problem for pretty much any receiver that he faces. Did have some reps where speed was a problem. Notably, Tez Johnson got the better of him on a couple of one-on-ones. But overall, I think you have to like what Azareye'h brings to the table physically. And I like and fits the Anarumo defense. So I think that's a solid pick for them too.
Yep, Bill, you were on the clock for the Dolphins as well, actually. So that one's yours. Yep.
Oh. And I thought it was Brock, but if I'm going Dolphins here, I will make the pick for Miami.
Wait, I might have Brock's right here. I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say
he's not in the chat. Okay, yeah, he's going Donovan Jackson.
Yep, I was going to say it's got to be offensive line here for Miami with them going Starks in round one. They've got to get some sort of protection for Tua Tagovailoa, and Donovan Jackson here, the guard guard tackle from Ohio State. I think he's afforded the opportunity to start at tackle, but likely will slide inside at the next level. I think that would be an excellent selection here. I know some folks are having him in round 1. I'm not quite there in that conversation yet. He ranks right underneath Membu for me as my offensive line number 11. This would probably be right about where he looks. And Cincinnati's on the clock, and Parker taking a swing for the fences here, going Donovan Ezeraku, the edge rusher from Boston College. I like this one. I think if you're moving on from Trey Hendrickson, you're going to need to replace his pass rush. If he's still there, you still need a running mate for him, and I think Ezeraku is that guy. The size is a concern, whether it's kind of the Jalen Walker conversation a little bit, where is he a linebacker? Is he an edge? How do you want to play it? But I think this is an excellent pick here for Cincinnati. Anthony, how do you feel about the last 2 picks of Jackson and Ezeraku?
Yeah, the 2 Donovans. Donovan Jackson, great pick for the Dolphins. I am a little higher on him than I think you are. I do have him in that late first, early second range. And for Miami, they desperately need help up front to facilitate their rushing attack. And Donovan really impressed this year. I think filling in at a position he had never played before at left tackle, and wasn't amazing, but showed that he actually was capable of playing the position, got better as the year went on. So really bumped his draft stock with that. I do think he's a guard long term, but knowing that he can play tackle on the pinch is really helpful. Ezeraku, such a dynamite pass rusher, intense motor, just great bend, great burst off the line. It's really really fun to watch him play football. I think he had like double-digit sacks. I don't remember the number now, but he was a menace all season long. And so this is a solid pick for Cincinnati. And Seattle taking Deion Walker out of Kentucky, just purely in terms of physical traits. This dude's a top 5 pick. He is 6'6", 340 pounds. Just a mastodon of a man, but shows there are times where he plays like a top 5 player. He shows amazing quickness for his size, intense athleticism, just a special talent. The problem is that is not all the time. There are consistency questions. And I don't think it's an effort thing so much as it is just either conditioning or just an inability to be consistent. So if he's able to put it together for 4 quarters for 17 games, he can absolutely be a huge asset for this Seahawks defensive line. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And his measurements, 6'7" and a quarter, 340 pounds, 34 5/8 inch arm length, 84 and a half inch wingspan, just a mountain of a man. And I'm with you. I think there's some conversation about his cardio, about his pad level that he needs to address, and especially with leverage, playing a little bit taller than he should. Willie Lampkin, Power Peanut, as he's often been referred to by Ryan Sparks, kind of stood him up in leverage and some one-on-one reps, which you don't want to put too much stock in one-on-ones, but that one caught my eye, and I'd be concerned with it. But I think you're right on. Top 5 guy if we're talking physical traits style of guy. And Denver on the clock now goes Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa. Listen, folks, if you're not hip to Caleb Johnson's game, I strongly encourage you to get so quickly. He is the best wide zone style runner in this entire NFL draft class. I have him currently fighting for running back number 3 with Dylan Sampson for me. But this is a guy, going to date myself with the comp a little bit, but Cedric Benson, when he was at Texas, that same style of runner, that's what you're going to get from Caleb Johnson. And I think this is an excellent fit for Sean Payton's offense here. And I think it's a great selection. And Pittsburgh on the clock now, going Clay Webb, the guard from Jacksonville State. Anthony, how do you feel about the last two selections, Caleb Johnson and Clay Webb?
So I'll start with Caleb. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I agree with you. I think it's a solid fit. I'm lower on Caleb than probably most people. He's my RB. I think he's RB7 for me. I'll double check. RB6. So similar, but yeah. I worry about his ability to be able to create as a runner. I think if the hole is there for him, he is great at finding it, accelerating through it, and finishing tough runs. But if the hole is not there, I am just worried about what he can do to make something out of nothing. So that would be my concern. But I do think Denver is a very good place for him. Clay Webb feels very early here, to be frank. And I like him. I think he brings a lot to the table. But I was just looking through the fact that Ariante Ursary is not taken yet, and we're taking Clay Webb is a bit of a head scratcher for me.
Bit of a shock.
But who am I to question the GM that made that pick? But yeah, Clay Webb feels really early here. I like what he brings to the table, particularly as a pass blocker. But I don't know if I condone him being picked 52. And then the Bucks taking JT Tuimoloau, JTT, from Ohio State. And this is a guy who, him and teammate Jack Sawyer, both are just sort of these gritty, good run defenders. They're not going to bring you a ton as pass rushers, but I think they can be good NFL players. They feel very high floor players, which is normally an expression I don't usually love, but they feel very high floor. They'll last in the league over a long time. I kind of just question how high of a ceiling they have. But I do like the fit in Tampa also. I think that makes sense for them. So, and we've got another pick here, Maxwell Harrison, corner from Kentucky, who's been really good this Senior Bowl week, really showing off impressive man cover skills. And really, I think this is a Green Bay corner,
Yes.
a guy that I think Packers fans would love to have opposite Jair Alexander. I think he's really shown how good of a defender he is this week. Really smart corner as well. I like this fit a lot. So Bill, what do you make of these last couple picks here?
Yeah, so I'm with you. I think Clay Webb being the selection and JTT being the selection, I have third round grades on both of those guys. I think they're still a little too high for me, especially when you have guys like Ariante Ursary on the board and you have edge rushers, like Ashton Gilotti on the board, Kyle Kennard from South Carolina. I think those are a little bit too high for me here. I love the Green Bay Packer pick of Maxwell Hairston. Medicals are a concern for me, obviously, him being able to stay healthy. But I think that's definitely a 100% type of guy that the Packers would covet. Speaking of guys that have made themselves some money at the Senior Bowl this week, the Los Angeles Chargers go Elijah Arroyo, the tight end from Miami. I like this pick a lot. I think Arroyo has made himself some money down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. He's a little bit lower on my board because I am concerned about the medicals for him. Obviously, he's missed multiple games in his career, and the best ability anyone can have is availability. But he showed a really fluid ability to catch the ball in space and move quickly. And you kind of saw that this season with Cam Ward. He was kind of that safety valve for Cam Ward. When Restrepo wasn't open, the next look was towards Arroyo. And you kind of seen that. Some folks, it's a little bit rich. I have him right around here, end of the second, start of the third. So I'm not overly concerned. But Buffalo's back on the clock here. And I think if you're Buffalo, the conversation has to be, you went defensive tackle in round 1. Do you go edge here? Do you go wide receiver here? Those are some question marks that you have to have. Do you even go safeties potentially or corner? Anthony, if you're Buffalo, if you're Brandon Beane, where are you looking here?
Yeah, I'm looking at my board now. I would probably I think wide receiver is where I'm leaning toward at this point. I do still have faith in Keon Coleman going forward, and Khalil Shakir showed he can be a pretty decent weapon, but they need more. They need more help us for weapons for Josh Allen. I'm looking at Matthew Golden here. I'm looking at potentially a Trey Harris. I'm a big Ricky White fan. Some people are not, but one of those guys is probably where I'm going. Could maybe be a safety pick, but I don't know if I love any of the safeties at this spot. It feels a little early for a lot of the safeties that are still left. But it could be an edge too.
Yep.
But edges, there's a lot of guys that are grouped in this sort of like late second to third round. So I feel like Buffalo maybe could wait one more round to get another edge player to go opposite Rousseau.
Right.
I think I'm going receiver here.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I would be looking at a Ty Felton from Maryland, a Jack Besh from TCU, Matt Golden, obviously still here as well. I think it's pretty surprising. If you're looking safety, you're probably looking at like a Kevin Winston from Penn State. Obviously has some injury concerns about him, so I don't know if you feel comfortable with him going here. It looks like the pick is in, and Buffalo's going Matthew Golden. This is a guy who's made himself some money over the last 6 or 7 weeks with his performance. I had him as a day 3 guy, and I had Isaiah Bond up towards the top of my draft board. But over the past 6 or 7 weeks, through the college football playoff, Golden really rose where Bond fell, and he's kind of like a Devin Duvernay type of guy. He's a really good safety outlet for you. Pretty quick, very good hands, but he does have some chest catch problems. So I know some folks have him first round. I'm not there. I have him right about where he is, end of the second, beginning of the third. But I think this is a good selection. And Carolina is back on the clock now. And, looking at Carolina and kind of where they're looking, in terms of their board, obviously the big needs coming in for them: edge, wide receiver, corner. They went Jalen Walker in round 1, kind of, an edge linebacker hybrid. But I would think that you'd want to try to get Bryce Young a weapon here. So I think we see a little bit of a mini run on wide receiver. By that same token, do you maybe want to look at offensive line? There's guys like Ariante Ursary still here. Wyatt Milam is still here. If you want to look at right tackle, guys like Ozzie Trapillo, Holland Pierce is still here. If you feel comfortable gambling on Cam Williams and his ceiling, he's still here. Anthony, what do you think the Panthers are thinking about here on the clock?
Yeah, it's interesting because I do actually think the offensive line played decently well for them this year. But the value here just feels so immense. I mentioned Ursary. I think it's kind of insane that he's still here. And even like Milam, who, didn't have the best Senior Bowl week, I don't think, but still feels like a top 50 player. So I'm a little surprised he's here. Cam Williams has that boom or bust potential that you could take a chance on. I just feel like, I feel like the value of offensive line is too great at this point, that even if it's not the biggest need for them, just get another big body up front to help your run game that you're trying to make the foundation of your offense, and your young quarterback that you have started to see some flashes out of after a miserable rookie season. So I guess maybe the only other one I'd say is corner, somebody opposite J.C. Horn, but I think the offensive line is just too good at this spot.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You look at it: Ursary, Milam, Embo from Purdue, Trapillo from Boston College, Holland Pierce from Rutgers, Cam Williams from Texas. Even if you want to go with like a Luke Kandra out of Cincinnati, he's here too. There's a lot of good offensive lineman talent here. So I think that the value there is offensive line, but the need, it's need versus value that we always talk about, right? When we talk about the draft, what's our need versus what's the value we're going to get here? Does Carolina really need an offensive lineman when they have other needs at like corner, at safety, and even at tight end, potentially at running back, potentially, even with the Jonathan Brooks question mark? But that's kind of where I think you're going to have to say, hey, here in round 2, we just take the best player available and we just roll with it and we keep it moving. Which, if it's me, I would probably look at probably either Ursary or Embo from Purdue. Ursary, you play at tackle. Embo from Purdue, you play inside and you figure it out. Again, one of those, take your best 5 offensive linemen and keep it moving. So looks like Carolina's pick is in, and it's Ariante Ursary, the left tackle from Minnesota. I think it's a slam dunk selection. This is a guy that probably could have been off the board at the end of the first round, start of the second. So to get him here at pick 57 is excellent value. And the Texans on the clock now, and everything we just said about Carolina, you can kind of flip for the Texans as well. Offensive line is the big need. They went Burden in round 1 just because, again, value was there. But now I think it's kind of more of the need for the Texans. Getting an offensive line, especially along the interior, to help protect C.J. Stroud. That interior offensive line got exposed in that playoff game. So I would say, if you're looking the Texans, probably Marcus Embo from Purdue is my next best interior offensive lineman. But Anthony, what are you thinking Texans do here?
Yeah, I don't want to say the Texans got lucky here, but they kind of got lucky here because you have a really good selection of interior offensive linemen at pick 58. But apparently that doesn't matter because we're going to take Tyleik Williams, the defensive lineman from Ohio State, who I was about to say almost criminal that he was still on the board at this point, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So I can't even be mad at this pick because it is insanely good value. But at the same time, the fact that they haven't taken an offensive lineman is also insane. So I'm torn. But speaking on Tyleik, the dude, I think he initially was, his bread and butter was run defense, arguably the best interior run defender that we saw this season. And as the season went on, he slowly but surely showed that he could be a pass rush threat. I don't think he's I wouldn't put him in the Derek Harmon category or even like Mason Graham, I think is a little more effective as a pass rusher, but he definitely showed that there are tools there to work with as a pass rusher in the interior. And again, brings you that such good run defense. I think it's insane again that he is here at pick 58. And the Texans do need help on that interior defensive line as well. Just got absolutely gashed multiple times this season. So I get it. It makes a lot of sense. It's a great pick, but man, the fact that they're not getting an offensive lineman in the first 60 picks is wild. So yeah, mixed feelings here.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think if you're Houston, to not take an offensive lineman here seems pretty crazy. Baltimore's on the clock now, and it looks like the pick is in, and it's Jack Sawyer, the edge from Ohio State. Again, this is another one. It's still a little high for me for Sawyer. I have him as a round 3 guy, but I'm not 100% against it. I think it's a little bit high. If I'm Baltimore, I probably would have looked somewhere in the defensive backfield, either corner or safety, or maybe even a wide receiver opposite Zay Flowers, especially with the talent that's still on the board here. But I think this is a good selection for Jack Sawyer. It's just still a little high for me. The Lions are on the clock now, and it looks like Leo has the selection for the Lions here, and he's dropped it in, and it's Tate Ratledge, the guard from Georgia. Listen, the man with the mullet is going to fit right in Detroit. And this is a guy, he is, if we're talking pure guards, so guys that wouldn't convert tackle to guard, pure guard wise, he is my number 2 guard in this group, right behind Tyler Booker. I think that this guy is a very talented guard in terms of the run game, in terms of moving people around. This is a mauler in every sense of the word. And I am a big fan of it. Anthony, how do you feel about Tate Ratledge here to Detroit?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think this is a great pick. It's a very Lions pick. They do have aging offensive linemen, questions long term about who's going to stick around and for how long. I think Ratledge is a guy that you can bring him in, he'll fit right in, and he can be a long term starter down the road when those guys leave. So I'm all for this. Now the Commanders back on the clock again after taking Walter Nolan first round in an intriguing decision. So we'll see where they go here. I'm inclined to believe that this is either a receiver or an offensive lineman. Probably the 2 spots I'm looking at. Bill, what about you? What are you thinking here?
Yeah, so I'm with you. I'm looking I'm looking an offensive weapon. I'm looking at wide receiver. So in my first round mock I did over at twsn.net that dropped today. If you're still watching, folks, go check that out. I had them going Jack Besh in round 1 for the Commanders. I think that the fact that he's still here in round 2, I think if I'm the Commanders, I'm running the card up for Jack Besh and getting a wide receiver talent to pair with Scary Terry. I'm also not opposed to defensive backfield, such as a safety or a corner here as well. I would also think potentially linebackers in play here. I think with the talent that's here, I think you could also look at offensive linemen, Cam Williams, Wyatt Milam, Ozzie Trapillo, guys we've already talked about, I think would be probably the biggest selection here. But if I were making the pick for the Commanders, I'm saying Jack Besh is where I'm going. But ultimately, the Commanders GM may have a different pick on it. Looks like the pick is in for the Commanders, and it is Jack Besh out of TCU. I think that's definitely the selection. I think you get Jaden Daniels, another weapon at wide receiver, and you continue to build around him and continue to add talent. And the Buffalo Bills on the clock here at pick 62 in the tail end of the first round. They went defensive tackle in round 1. Round 2, I would think probably looking at corner, maybe looking potentially at linebacker possibly. But Anthony, where do you think the Buffalo Bills go here in round 2?
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong. They took Kenneth Grant with the first pick, and then who was their second round pick? It was
Matthew Golden.
Right, Matthew Golden. Okay, yeah. So Yeah, I think it's edge is on the table here. This could be. I think this could be a potential Kevin Winston spot. You mentioned it before. Medicals are a worry with him. Played literally one game this season, but another guy that if we're basing this on 2023 tape, he would have been gone a long time ago. He showed that he has really good cover skills, good size for the position, 6'2", 200 pounds, something like that. So he is a guy that I think would really be a good asset in the Bills defense. So yeah, those are probably the two spots I'm looking at: edge or safety. Kevin Winston would probably be the only safety I would want here. But we'll see what the Bills decide to do.
Yeah, we have Taylor Rapp. We have Taylor Rapp locked in for 2025, and he's a free agent in 2026. So the projected will be Rapp and Bishop starting 2025. So if we were to take Winston here, he could almost just learn for a full half a year, maybe take a starting role in the second half of the year. And then 2026, it's Winston and Bishop starting, just like how they would want back in the day with Poyer and Hyde together. That duo safety is big for the Buffalo Bills.
And not even just learn too, but also just recover medically.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
That would help too. Yeah.
Win-win.
Absolutely.
All right, we're gonna go Kevin Winston. I'll give Vincent one more.
I was gonna say it looks like he dropped the pick in the chat. Yeah.
You see it?
So yeah, just came through. So it looks like Zy Alexander is the corner from LSU.
All right.
Is the selection, and I like the pick. I like Zy Alexander.
Yeah.
I don't like him here though. It's a little early for me. I have him as a day 3 guy, but he has the length at corner, really good ball skills. The big concern is that his hand usage in press coverage is just very inconsistent. Sometimes he just gives a straight free release off the line, and sometimes it turns into a holding. So I have him as a 4th round guy. So it's a little early for me for him. But I don't hate the team fit. I just hate how early it is, especially with all the talent that's still here on the board. With the Chiefs and the Eagles and Chiefs on the clock here to end out round 2. Anthony, how do you feel about the Zy Alexander selection?
Yeah, I'm not as against it as you are from a value perspective. I had a 3rd round grade on him. So this is also a little early for me, but maybe not as much. I was going to say the fact that we passed on Darian Porter over him was a question mark for me. And so now I get to talk about Darian Porter as he goes to the Eagles. Darian Porter is just so talented. He's so talented. He's 6'2", 197 pounds. So probably going to run a 4.3 40-yard dash at the combine. If I had to guess, he was clocked at 22 miles an hour as his top speed during the Senior Bowl this past week. And you watch him play, and you wonder why he didn't get more snaps in coverage. For some reason, he just wasn't on the field a ton, but I blame the coaches more than I blame him, because when he was on the field, he was essentially a lockdown corner. I want to say he gave up literally like a 5 passer rating to when he was targeted. So he certainly has room to grow in areas. He hasn't been playing the position incredibly long, particularly as a starter. So there's things with his technique that he needs to work on, particularly in press man situations. But all of the physical traits are there. And just the idea that him, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean are in the same secondary is just like, why do we keep letting this happen as like a league? Would be my first thought. Yeah. But another just insane draft pick. Trevion Henderson goes to the Chiefs, which is a pick that I actually saw Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers made this same exact pick earlier today, and I was sort of mixed on it because I understand I get the talent-wise. I have no question this is a great value for him. I think Trevion Henderson's a top 50 player. It makes sense in that Pacheco has now some health concerns. He was out for an extended period, and Kareem Hunt is, he's cool in spurts, but by no means is he a long-term viable running back that you're going to have as your lead guy. So Henderson does give you that explosiveness, and I suppose if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you literally can just go best player available all the time, and it doesn't really matter. But this is a bit of a curious fit, and I wonder if this would mean, if this happened in real life, that you would see more of a committee style running back room as opposed to just Pacheco being the lead back when he's healthy on the field. The picks are flying in as we enter the third round here. So, Bill, if you want to give your quick thought here.
Let's do a quick round two. We got a couple that went fast, but I'm going to do a quick recap of round two.
Yeah,
and
let's run back through them.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to start. Beautiful pick at 33 with the Browns taking Harold Fannin from Bowling Green. We got Emenwari, love that, at the Giants, going from South Carolina at 34. We got a big one in Savion Williams, TCU, going 35 to the Titans. We got Ole Miss's Trey Amos going to Jacksonville. We've got Jaden Higgins from Iowa State going to the Raiders. We got Nick Scourton, Texas A&M, going to the New England Patriots. We got Mr. Landon Jackson from Arkansas going to Chicago. I'll try my best, but Princely Uman Milan from Ole Miss going to pick 40. We got Armand Membao from Missouri going to Chicago. We got Xavier Watts from Notre Dame going to the New York Jets. We got Gray Zabel, wonderful Senior Bowl, North Dakota State, going 43 to the San Francisco 49ers. We got Derek Harmon from Oregon going over to the Dallas Cowboys. We've got Azariah Thomas from Florida State going to the Indianapolis Colts. We got Jack Kaiser from Notre Dame going to Atlanta Falcons. Even when Clint's not here, he's picking. We got Xavier Restrepo from Miami going to pick 47 to the Cardinals. We got Donovan Jackson from Ohio State going to Miami. Donovan Ezerako going to Boston College to the Bengals. We got Deion Walker, big boy from Kentucky, going to Seattle. We got Caleb Johnson, the running back from Iowa, going to the Broncos. We've got Clay Webb, Jacksonville State, from going to Pittsburgh. We got JT Tulamalu from Ohio State, going to the Bucks. We got Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky going to Green Bay. We've got Elijah Arroyo from Miami going over to the LA Chargers. We've got Matthew Golden from Texas going to Buffalo. We've got Arante Ursary from Minnesota going to the Carolina. Tyleek Williams from Ohio State going to the Texans. Jack Sawyer from Ohio State going to the Ravens. Tate Ratledge from Georgia going to the Lions. Mr. Jack Bash from TCU going to the Commanders. Zaya Alexander from LSU going to Buffalo. Darian Porter, Iowa State, going to Philadelphia. And last in round two, Travion Henderson from Ohio State going to the Chiefs. A lot of mix-ups in there, and it's fun. It's fun after every single round to see what's available. And there's some people available. Look at Kennard, Swinson, Gillette, Ivy,
Turner,
Riley Bell, Sanders.
Yeah, so while we wrap up, it looks like the pick is in for the Browns as well, with Christian going Wyatt Milam, the offensive tackle from West Virginia. Again, being a Browns fan, as you can see the banner in my background, absolutely love the pick. I think it's a very good selection to get a left tackle of the future or a right tackle if DeJuan Jones sticks at left tackle. But kind of rolling back the curtain a bit, Kansas City Chiefs taking Gunnar Helm, who is my tight end number 2 on my big board positional rankings right now. I love the fit. I think it's a very good selection because you're gonna, kind of pass the torch from Travis Kelce. Before that, Giants going Cam Williams, again getting protection for getting protection for Cam Ward, obviously going in round 1. And then before that, Travion Henderson going to the Chiefs as well. That kind of assumes that you're almost moving on from Kareem Hunt, and it's now Pacheco and, Travion Henderson in your backfield. And then the Raiders, they're going with the just win baby Al Davis selection here. Isaiah Bond, it's just pure speed. That's what it is for the Raiders here. It's the just win baby, the Darius Hayward Bay, who runs a 4.340, and Al Davis says, give me fast. Definitely like that pick. Give Sanders a weapon here. Patriots on the clock now. Looking here, if you're the Patriots, the big needs obviously coming in: offensive tackle, edge. You'd like to see a cornerback opposite Christian Gonzalez. You'd like to see wide receiver talent as well, which they kind of hit both with Travis Hunter in round 1. So kind of wherever you don't play Travis Hunter full time, if you play him at wide receiver full time, then get a corner. If you play him at corner full time, you get a wide receiver. Looks like the pick's in for New England, and they're going to go, looks like.
Oh, I got to change that. Whoops, press the wrong button. We'll leave Ozzie Trapilo available, and then I'll switch it out. Sorry, Jeff. I didn't see that. Trey Harris.
Yep. Trey Harris.
Yep.
Yep. Trey Harris, the pick for New England there. I like that pick. It would almost certainly mean that Travis Hunter is now a full-time corner with snaps at wide receiver, which I think is the best way to use him at the next level. But with Trey Harris, he's a guy, I have him in this range right around round 3 type of area. Jacksonville's on the clock now, but Anthony, how do you feel about the last couple picks in Milam Bond and Trey Harris?
Yeah, so we talked about Milam a little bit earlier. The fact that he's here at 67 is insanely great value for the Cleveland Browns, and he's an immediate starter. Will really help shore up the run game, I think. You'll play him on the inside right away. I don't think he's going to be a tackle. I just frankly, I think the arms are just too short, and he just doesn't have the measurables. But he's a really good physical offensive lineman for you. You said it. Isaiah Bond is just, he's fast, and it's tough because there was a point this season where I probably would have been willing to argue that Isaiah Bond would have been a first-round player, probably even like a top 20 player. That quickly dissipated, and now, frankly, I think I would take him on day 3. I think he just doesn't offer really anything that valuable as a receiver besides speed, which, I mean, I guess it's an asset, and at 68 isn't like the worst thing ever to bet on, but I think there are several other better receiving options that I would have preferred here. So Trey Harris being one of them going to New England, I think that's a really solid pick. Questions about how just developed he is as a receiver, but big body guy, can stretch the field. I think he adds something to the offense that just isn't there. They have guys like McMillan, guys like Baker and guys like Douglas that can be more of the quick, twitchy guys, whereas Trey Harris can be that big body guy that Drake May really needs. Then we have Terrence Ferguson, who I think people like more than I do, but he has had a very good Senior Bowl week. Just kind of an all-around tight end. Can be that pass catcher, can be that blocker. I just frankly don't think he's particularly special in any one area, and so that's why I'm a bit lower on him than most. But this is a fine pick for Jacksonville. Adds the tight end that Liam Cohen does value. We saw how much Cade Otton meant to the Buccaneers offense last year, particularly when Chris Godwin went down. So it makes sense from that perspective. I'm not the biggest Terrence Ferguson guy, but I get it. So, Bill, what are your thoughts on Ferguson here to the Jags?
Yeah, so I'm with you. He's still a day 3 guy for me. You see shades of Mark Andrews in his game, kind of an all around guy, not going to really specialize in one given area for you. I would have liked to preferably see Mason Taylor here, or Luke Lakey, or even like a Jalen Conyers from Texas Tech as well. And I'm being reminded by the producers in the back that Travis Hunter did not go to the Patriots. It was actually Will Campbell Jr. So the Trey Harris pick for New England still makes sense regardless, whether it's Travis Hunter, whether it's Will Campbell, whether it's anyone else. It's still an excellent selection there. But the Saints on the clock now, and there's still Jackson Dart available. There's still Jalen Milroe available. Anthony, you're the Saints GM. You're Mickey Loomis here. Are you looking quarterback here in round 3?
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier when we were doing other picks of where exactly I was going to go with the Saints. I'm just not there with Jackson Dart. I think Jackson Dart might be the guy that I've seen the most broadest spectrum of opinions. People are saying
Highest
arguably
variance.
QB1. People are saying arguably 6th round. So I don't know why we're so far apart on Jackson Dart, but I'm not going to take him here for the Saints.
Dan Orlovsky planted him round 1 today, and obviously his word isn't obviously bond or anything, but he can hit on some quarterbacks.
No, I mean, and listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I am a quarterback expert as much as Dan Orlovsky is, but I don't see it. So I'm going to skip I'm going to skip quarterback in general here. Jalen Milroe's, I guess, kind of fun, but we don't know who their head coach is going to be, so I'm not going to do that yet.
I'm taking
I do think the Saints need a pass catcher. So that's kind of where my head is. I almost, this feels like receiver or tight end. You know what? We did just talk about him. I'll go with Mason Taylor. Keep the LSU kid in Louisiana. And Bill, you touched on it. Mason Taylor is, I think, more of a complete tight end than like a Terrence Ferguson is. And he really showed at the Senior Bowl this week. He's very, very polished as a route runner. He's really good hands, brings good size to the position. I think he's one of the more underrated players in this draft class. And I think he adds something to the Saints offense that they just don't have. They don't really have like a reliable player that can go over the middle and be a weapon there for, again, I said it before, I don't know who their quarterback is going to be next year, but whoever it is could certainly use a tight end like Mason Taylor. So I think this is a pretty solid pickup for the Saints.
Yep. No, I agree with you. The NFL bloodlines are real for Jason Taylor. Obviously son of a Hall of Famer, nephew of a Hall of Famer. I think keeping him in Louisiana is just an excellent selection. And the Bears going Omar Norman Lott, defensive tackle out of Tennessee. Listen, he's talented, and we get that. I have a day 3 grade on him, though. There's a lot of times where his motor runs too hot and cold for me. There are some off the field concerns that you have with Omar Norman Lott, some issues with teammates and causing fights and things like that. So he's very talented, but I don't know if he's round 3 talented for me. And there were guys still on the board, if you're looking here, guys like TJ Sanders, Riley Mills, Shamar Turner, that I probably would have gotten in a different area, but I'm not a fan of the lot selection here. Raiders on the clock now. And I think if you're the Raiders here, it has to be a running back. You have to get some sort of a running weapon. in that backfield. I'm personally still shocked that Omarion Hampton is still here. He's my running back 2, and I know that there's some folks that are saying first round for him. I have him as an early second guy, but I think he's still shocked here. I'm still shocked to see him here. Even guys like Dylan Sampson. And as I live and breathe, as soon as I speak Omarion Hampton to the Raiders here, my running back 2, everything I said, his play style is like a lot like Todd Gurley when he was at Georgia. That same kind of physical runner, but also has the juice to get upfield. And I think this is a home run selection for the Raiders here. With the Panthers on the clock now, Anthony, how do you feel about the last 2 picks in Norman Lott and Hampton?
Yeah, so I'll start with Norman Lott. I'm actually a pretty big fan of his. I think talent-wise, I think he is a top 50 player. I do see the concerns that you do with inconsistency. And I speak to the off the field stuff, but that's obviously not nothing. So I think this is a pretty reasonable spot for him. I actually really like this pick for Chicago. Omarion Hampton being here at 73 is another just almost criminal drop for him. I also have an early second round grade on him, but if he went, in that 28 to 32 range, I wouldn't be mad at it. I think he is incredibly talented. And if Ashton Dainty wasn't in this class, we would be, I think, talking about him as the running back that would go in the first round.
Right.
You said it. He runs with power, runs over people, but also is deceptively explosive. So the Raiders having him and Brock Bowers in the same offense is a pretty fun time. Pete Carroll is loving this draft pick.
Right. Pete Carroll's loving this draft altogether. And the Panthers on the clock now. And while we wait and take a look and see what the Panthers GM is, let's flip back through the Panthers draft and let's see kind of how they've gone so far. I know Jalen Walker was their round 1 selection. And I believe Ariante Ursery was their round 2 selection, but I thought they had another one. I may have been wrong on that. Just to double check and make sure. Yeah, so it's just been Jalen Walker and Ariante Ursery. So I think if you're Carolina here, if you're Carolina's GM, it's got to be a corner if the value is there. If it's not corner, then I would probably look at maybe going defensive line, like a defensive tackle. I would maybe also look at a safety. If I'm going corner, I would like a guy probably like a Quincy Riley from Louisville. Really showed up at the Senior Bowl this week. Really showed some sticky man coverage skills and some press coverage skills. Would do very well in that Carolina defensive backfield. Also, I would also look at wide receiver as well because the talent that's still here. Ty Felton, Jalen Royals, other guys like that, on my board, Pat Bryant, even Ja'Cory Brooks from Louisville. So I think if you're the Panthers, it's either wide receiver or corner here. Anthony, what do you think the Panthers do here?
No, I 100% agree. I'll throw out a couple other names. For corner, I'm a Noel Williams fan. So I think he could be a pick here. I think Quincy Riley is a solid choice as well. At receiver, you mentioned Jalen Royals. I like Jalen Noel a lot. He had a really good Senior Bowl week. Has sort of flown under the radar, sort of in the shadow of Jaden Higgins, and not just because he's bigger. But as I say it, so it shall be. Jalen Noel goes to the Panthers. And this is a guy who really, I think, showed how good he is. And it was sort of slept on because Jaden Higgins was the big, fluid number 1 receiver for the Cyclones. But Jalen Noel, such a good route runner, is not really a burner, but he's quick, he's twitchy, he can win on the outside and in the slot. I think he adds a nice. He's a nice fit for the Dave Canales offense. I think he's a really a good sort of 1-2 with Xavier Legette. I think they can kind of recreate that Higgins-Noel combo in that way. So I think this is a really a good pick for Carolina, and makes a lot of sense for what they want to do offensively.
Yep, absolutely. And I agree. I think it's a good fit for them. And San Francisco on the clock now. Go TJ Sanders, defensive tackle out of South Carolina. And Jay Vert in the chat hits on it. Young guy on the interior. Hargrave likely gone. A lot of juice, a lot of raw talent. I compare him to young Quinnen Williams in terms of his overall play style. It kind of plays in that same mold, does a lot of good things for you. And I have him as a mid-second round guy in that 50 to 60 range. So I think him being here is an excellent fit for what San Francisco wants to do. And Dallas on the clock, and they go with a running back. Finally, here at pick 76, Quinshon Judkins, the running back from Ohio State, the other Ohio State running back, which, I'm a little lower on him in terms of where I rank Travion versus Quinshon. But his play style reminds me a lot of DeMarco Murray when DeMarco Murray was with the Cowboys. That same style of runner, a very talented style of guy. Obviously, the concern is, can he be a bell cow back for you in the backfield? Can he be that one running back one? But if you're picking one here at 76, you're probably looking at more of a committee basis if you're looking at running back. But Patriots on the clock now here. And we've talked about it. Will Campbell in round 1, Trey Harris in round 2. If you're New England here in round 3, where do you think New England's GM Jeff is probably looking? I'm thinking corner is probably where I would look, but where do you think they're looking?
Yeah, I think corner makes sense. Quite honestly, this could be offensive line again. I think the offensive line is that desperate for talent, and it looks like it is offensive line again. Holland Pierce out of Rutgers, who, if you're not familiar with him, I compared him to a skyscraper. He is 6'8", 350 pounds. He is just absolutely insanely large. And he showed it at the Senior Bowl, how large he is. If he gets his hands on you, you're not getting past him. It's pretty much over. Now, the counter to that is he struggles with speed. He struggles with bend. He struggles with a quick first step, which is, to be expected. But he's a guy where if he can work on his ability to handle that quickness and explosiveness, the size and the length and the physical traits are there to be a dominant left tackle. I could also see him potentially, New England wants to move him to the right side. This is a very, very Josh McDaniels offensive lineman too. So I think this is a solid pick for New England. Probably earlier than I would take him. I still think Holland Pierce is a day 3 guy, just because of those questions around his ability to handle NFL speed. But the ceiling and potential is there to make this pick a really good one.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I agree with you. I'm a little higher on Pierce than most. I have him in that mid-round 2 range. So I think this is probably right around his range. But Arizona Cardinals on the clock now here. And we went defensive tackle in round 1 with Alfred Collins. Round 2, we went wide receiver with Matthew Golden. Round 3, I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path here. And I'm going to go linebacker. And I'm going to go with a guy who's sideline to sideline, rangy, plays like his hair is on fire, very good tackling machine from the formerly the Pac-12, now the Big Ten. Carson Schlesinger, linebacker from UCLA. Very disappointed that couldn't see him at the Senior Bowl. Was looking forward to seeing him there, but I think Schlesinger is going to be a very excellent fit for this Cardinals linebacking group and fit right in. Definitely a plays like his hair is on fire type of guy. And it looks like Commanders are on the clock here. Where do we think the Commanders are probably looking at this point in the draft?
Yeah, I'm gonna need a reminder of who the Commanders have taken.
Yeah.
Randall.
Walter
Nolan was round 1. We talked about him.
And then Jack Besh was round 2.
And Jack Besh was round 2. Okay. So yeah, I think this is an offensive line pick potentially. This could be. This could be a corner. I know they did just get Marshawn Lattimore, but you probably want to add some corner depth. But yeah, I feel like offensive line is where I'd be going here. I think they kind of exceeded expectations, but I don't know if they're going to keep exceeding expectations long term. And obviously, Jaden Daniels played his ass off all year. He played great, but he is still going to need a good offensive line in front of him. So yeah, I'm looking at offensive line here. I think that's kind of what
Andy, I'm going to have you make the pick. So if you're going offensive lineman, I got this.
Oh, great. Let's go with Marcus Bowe. He probably should, honestly, he's another one that should be gone by now probably, but gives me a chance to talk about him. So Marcus Bowe, sort of a mixed bag, I'd say, at the Senior Bowl this week. I think he showed his quickness, but I think frankly they had him playing tackle just too much because he's not a tackle in the NFL. He's going to go inside, guard or center. I think center is better for him, but you could also put him at right guard. But he's super quick, super athletic. I think his main problem is he just struggles with length, struggles with NFL size. But if you put him in a scheme where he can show off that athleticism and show off that quickness, I think he can really shine. And again, I do think center is probably his best position long term. And the fact he made it to 79 feels a little overkill. I probably would have taken him about 10, 15 picks ago. That's just the way the cookie crumbles, I guess. But I think he's an immediate starter for the Commanders going forward. But Bill, what do you think here?
Yeah, so I have Mbo going first round to like Detroit. So I think getting him here at pick 79 is just absolutely excellent value, regardless of whether you play him guard, center, or tackle. And I'm on the clock here with Indianapolis, and I'm going to go with another big body guy who's very athletic. I've had a first round grade on him for a little bit, but I've kind of slid back into that early second. It's defensive tackle Shamar Turner from Texas A&M. The fact that he's still here at pick 80 is just mind-blowing. I think the injury he has is a little bit concerning for some folks. Obviously not allowing him to play at the Senior Bowl. How is he going to even be able to test? But I think he fits the mold of what Indianapolis is going to do, is a big body defensive tackle guy. And that's where I'm looking. And Parker, I can hear him screaming all the way from the Cincinnati fandom, because if I didn't take him, Cincinnati assuredly would have. But I think it's an excellent fit for Indianapolis and Shamar Turner. But Anthony, what do you think about the Colts selecting here?
Yeah, I'm notoriously not a Shamar Turner guy. I just don't think I just didn't think he won consistently enough as an interior player. I think there's also questions just about his behavior. and attitude. He has some dirty plays in his catalog that I'm not a fan of. So I don't love him. But listen, I see the upside. I see the athleticism. I see the physical traits. So I can't hate it too much at 80. But pick 81 for the Bengals is a guy who I think has a strong argument for best Senior Bowl week. That is Darius Alexander from Toledo. So he gets to stay in Ohio. But Darius Alexander has just been balling these past few days. 6'3", 310, but he has just been he plays like he's got a firecracker up as you know what. He is explosive. Mm-hmm. He is moving at a lightning pace, but he also has power at that 3-tech spot. He has been again just balling out, and I hate to I don't want people to overreact to Senior Bowl week, and this is for me as well. I think we tend to want to do that, but you can't help but see just how good he was against first and second round offensive linemen. Nobody was able to stop him. So I think this is a very deserving placement, which is not what I would have said a week ago, but he absolutely is now in that top 75 conversation.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think he probably is the best Senior Bowl performance award winner this week, and I think Cincinnati getting him here is excellent value. The next pick on the board, Jordan Birch out of Oregon. This is a guy I'm a little bit lower on than most. I have a day 3 grade on him. Kind of reminds me of like a Dia AJ Epinesa coming out of Iowa, but I think it's the right position, just not the right guy. I would have looked at like a Kyle Kennard or a Jared Ivey at Ole Miss, but I can't fault them for going for the athletic edge rusher. Pittsburgh going quarterback here, Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss with pick number 83. Finally see a quarterback come off the board here. And then the Buccaneers going Ty Felton, the wide receiver from Maryland, here at pick 84, a potential Chris Godwin replacement, or if he comes back, now you have even more of a deeper wide receiver room. So, Anthony, of those last 3 picks, Birch, Dart, Felton, which one do you think is the best landing spot for that prospect?
Best landing spot. Well, I mean, it probably is Jackson Dart. I think it's
gotta be right.
It's gotta be because listen. You don't know. I don't know who's going to be their quarterback next year. I'm kind of assuming it's going to be Russell Wilson. I feel like they're going to want to bring him back, and they'll be willing to let Justin Fields go, particularly if they do wind up taking Jackson Dart. But in that scenario, you get to sit behind Russell Wilson. You get to go to a notoriously amazing franchise to just be a part of. You get Mike Tomlin as a head coach. You're not going to be forced into a bad situation. This is early for me. I know this is late for a lot of people. But yeah, this for Jackson Dart himself. This is probably pretty perfect. And speaking of perfect, Tez Johnson, this is perfect for him. Going to Denver at pick 85. This might be Tez Johnson to the Broncos is probably the most mocked, or not even mocked, just like people want it to happen pick. You have his adopted brother at quarterback. You have the Sean Payton offense, which just feels like a perfect vessel for him to be able to use the quickness and the explosiveness that he brings as a receiver. I am on record being extremely concerned with 5'9" and 156 pounds. And I see the quickness, the twitchiness, the route running, the separation. I see all of it, but I just cannot take a 156-pound football player in the top 100 picks. I can't do it. So, but this is, if you're going to do it, Denver's the place to do it. It is a match made in heaven for him as a player. So, Bill, if you want to weigh in on that, and we've got 2 more picks here as well.
Yeah, so I'm 100% with you. I have a day 3 grade on Tez Johnson. I get it's a perfect fit from a montage standpoint. Yes, it's his brother, and it's the Sean Payton offense that fits, but 155 pounds. Like Tutu Atwell for the Rams is about that same weight, 156 pounds. But even then, you have concerns about a guy of that size and whether he can stay healthy. And I think Denver would need more of a boundary type of receiver than they would an interior slot guy, which I think is what Tez is going to be. Chargers going Jonah Monheim, the center, and we say center with quotation marks, out of USC, because he can play any spot along that offensive line, guard, tackle, or center. This just puts another guy in front of Justin Herbert to give him some additional protection. And then Kyle Kennard, the edge out of South Carolina, going to Green Bay. I'm high on Kyle Kennard. I think he's a very excellent pass rusher type of player. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Dante Fowler Jr. when he was coming out of Florida. Definitely a very good talent. I think I have a late second round grade on him, so definitely a little bit of a fall for Kyle Kennard. Just other players pushing the talent down the board. And Jacksonville's pick is in, and they're going Chris Paul Jr., the linebacker out of Ole Miss, the first defensive talent to Jacksonville, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. And if so, a very excellent defensive talent nonetheless. Definitely a very solid tackler, a very excellent stud in the linebacker position. And then the picks coming in fast and furious, folks. Houston Texans going Anthony Belton, the offensive tackle out of NC State. That one's a little bit high for me. I am not sold on Anthony Belton as anything more than a day 3 guy right now. I think there's some gaps in his game that I'm just not a big fan of. But Anthony, of those last 2 picks in the AFC South, how are you feeling about Paul and Belton?
Yeah, so with Paul, I think he's another guy I'm just lower on than most people. I don't think he's as great a run defender as some people say he is. And I also don't think he's particularly amazing in coverage. I think he's just, he doesn't really win with physicality. I think he is rangy, but it's just, I don't know. I'm a guy who just likes bigger linebackers. Maybe that's just the bias that I have. So I don't love him, but I think it makes sense for the Jaguars here. Anthony Belton feels, no disrespect to whoever just made the pick, but it does feel very Senior Bowl reactionary because he has been just dominant this week. But if you watch the tape from this past season, it's a lot of inconsistency. And this was a guy who was in my top 40 after summer scouting. I was very high on Anthony Belton, but his tape was just all over the place. He had that one game where he spit in somebody's eye or something like that, or poked an eye or whatever he did, and got ejected. So that wasn't great. But I get it. Again, he had a great Senior Bowl week, and I'm sure he's going to continue to show that just physical dominance, which is why I loved him over the summer. But it still does feel a tad too high for what I feel like you need to work out with him. And then we've got maybe the most intriguing and or polarizing pick of this entire mock so far, Jalen Milroe going to the Los Angeles Rams. Now, this is interesting because value-wise, I think this is actually a pretty solid place for him because of the upside. There is a lot that needs to be worked on with his game. Giving him Sean McVay as a head coach and Matt Stafford as a mentor actually could be like pretty amazing for him. I do wonder if it feels though at the same time his weaknesses as a passer are the things that Sean McVay looks for in a passer, a guy who can hit those quick on time, short and intermediate passes. So I wonder what that fit, if that's going to work. But for Jalen Milroe's sake, again, giving him Sean McVay and Matt Stafford in a very, low pressure situation. You're also giving him, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp when he takes the field. So from that standpoint, I totally get it. But I do wonder long term if he's actually somebody Sean McVay would want as a franchise quarterback. I'll do quickly Ricky White here because he's one of my guys. I think Ricky White is so explosive as a wide receiver. Putting him in the Baltimore offense is really fun. Him and Zay Flowers is just a nightmare for secondaries to keep up with. So I like it from there. I kind of do wish we could give the Ravens some size at the wide receiver position. It feels like that's lacking, but I'm a fan of Ricky White. I think this is a great spot for him. So, Bill, I'll let you weigh in on the last couple picks here.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I think Jalen Milroe to the Los Angeles Rams is a very questionable, and I would say questionable in terms of fit, not in terms of where he was drafted. I think if anybody's going to get the most out of Jalen Milroe, it's going to be Sean McVay. If Stafford comes back for another year, then you're set up for Milroe in 2026 to be your star guy. Ricky White to Baltimore, I'm with you. I think probably would have looked to be a bigger wide receiver, maybe a Pat Bryant out of Illinois. But I don't fault the pick of Ricky White here. I'm a little lower on him than most. He's a day 3 guy for me just because of his size. But I kind of think that's an excellent fit, kind of a Darnell Mooney type. But Anthony, you're on the clock here with back-to-backs for the Jets and the Saints. So what do you have?
Yes, I am. All right. The Jets haven't picked in a long time. So if I remember correctly, they have Shamar Stewart and Xavier Watts, I believe, is who I gave them. So this does feel like we either need to go pass catcher or offensive line. And like Ricky White would have been a really nice pick here.
Jalen Royals still being here.
Jalen Royals.
Right.
Jalen Royals would be my receiver pick. Who are the tackles left before I lock that in? It probably will be. Okay. I don't love. No. Okay. Jalen Royals.
Fair.
Charles Grant was a thought for a split second, but I'm gonna.
I wish we could have saw him at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, Jalen Royals is, I think, one of the guys that's being way too slept on. He is just so good. He honestly reminds me of Luther Burden. I think he's so good after the catch. I don't think he's like quite as dynamic, and that's why Luther Burden is a touch higher. But it's that very similar thing where you just put the ball in his hands and he's going to make something happen. And in an offense with, presuming Devontae Adams doesn't come back, which I don't think he will at this point, but you put him next to Garrett Wilson, and those two guys can really do a lot of damage. So I would be really excited with getting a guy like Jalen Royals at pick 92 here. And I'll do the Saints here as well. They also could use wide receiver. I haven't given them one yet. Trey Harris isn't here. He went with New England. You know what? Okay, this gives me an excuse to talk about him. I'm gonna go with a guy that I really like. He was on the first page.
I know who it is. Yeah,
Efton Chisholm III from Eastern Washington. And if you're not familiar with him, you better get familiar with him, because I genuinely believe if there's one small school guy that nobody's talking about that's going to light up the NFL, it's Efton Chisholm III. He's very Cooper Kupp-like, and I say that, and then you're going to look up his size, and you're going to be like, he's nowhere near as big as Cooper Kupp is, and he's not. But in terms of his route running, in terms of his ability to separate and get open, and his ability to just find ways to be a wide receiver's best friend, he does it all. And it's listen, I don't know what they teach down or up at Eastern Washington, but clearly it's something good, because Efton Chisholm, you just watch him play, and he's just a good football player. It's really that simple. And getting him for the Saints here, Chris Olave, he's another guy who I hope we can see him be fully healthy and be the talented receiver that he is. We just don't know at this point, but whether he's on the field or not, Efton Chisholm is a really, really good football player, and he's going to be an impact player regardless of where he winds up. I have him in this range, this sort of late third round. I think he's that good, even though people just don't talk about him at all.
Yep. So I'm with you here while we wait for the Browns pick. Looks like it's going to probably be edge rusher. But I so we'll cover that one too. So Jalen Royals, wide receiver out of Utah State. I have a mid to late second round grade. So Jets getting excellent value here, kind of like a Randall Cobb type of player. Philadelphia up next, New Orleans up next. Efton Chisholm III, getting a wide receiver for the Saints, getting another pass catcher. Jared Ivey, the edge rusher out of Ole Miss. I really like his game. He's kind of like a Robert Quinn type of edge rusher, really good at rushing the passer, could use a little work in run defense as well, but a very solid selection here. So we got Philly and Kansas City on the clock here, and then we've got a few more selections here as we kind of make our way towards the end of the draft here. And it looks like Philly is in. Looks like David Walker from Central Arkansas. When we talked about earlier with Darius Alexander, guys that, could be the champion of make your money at Senior Bowl week with Darius Alexander, I'd argue David Walker is probably in that same mold of guy. Definitely a guy that I could see being an edge rusher. I could see being a inside linebacker. I could see being an outside linebacker, just kind of a multitude of selections here for him. And then Kansas City on the clock again, going Quincy Riley at corner. This is one of my most underrated corners in this draft. And again, another guy that made himself a lot of money down in Mobile. Does a lot of really good things. Obviously, size is a little bit of a concern for him on the boundary, whether you're going to play him outside or inside, but he's got the length to play outside. Kind of reminds me a lot of Greg Newsome for the Browns and what he's able to do, play a multitude of positions. And I think Kansas City is one of those teams that just throws picks at defensive backs. And Minnesota on the clock now, again, going corner, Justin Wally out of Minnesota. This is a guy I'm also very high on. Kind of reminds me of Jair Alexander for the Green Bay Packers. But Anthony, for those last three selections while we wait for the Dolphins pick, anything standing out to you on any of those guys?
Yeah, so David Walker, I think is this is probably honestly where I would take him. I love, he has great tape. He plays with power. I do just wonder, I didn't love his Senior Bowl week. I thought it was good. But I do just wonder if he really is going to be able to keep up with NFL offensive linemen. But he does have, again, that power and the violent hands that you want. Quincy Riley, I think, really impressed me this week. And this is about where he should go. He is smaller, but he just plays with such competitiveness. I think this is a good pick for Kansas City. And then Justin Wally, I think this is probably a little early for him. But good nickel corner. I think he is another guy that's just super competitive and a good man cover corner. So I like the pick. I feel like there's other corners on the board I probably would have taken before Wally, but Minnesota kid gets to stay in Minnesota, so I can't hate on it too much.
Yep, and it looks like Dolphins are going to be me on the clock here, and I'm going to go a little bit of a curveball here. It's probably a little too early for him, but it's going to be a quarterback, left-handed, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon. Listen, Dolphins need a backup quarterback with Tua's health and question marks, consistently missing time. He fits what they want to do as kind of a run and shoot style quarterback, a left-handed guy. It's probably a little early for Dylan Gabriel, and they probably have other big needs, but I think this is the swing that they have to take, especially if you're not 100% convinced that Tua can stay healthy for a long period of time. And San Francisco's on the clock here, 49ers, and they've had a quietly sneaky draft, but I know one guy that's still on the board is Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College. Even though, they may not need an offensive tackle, I know he's still here. But it looks like 49ers capping off day 2 with the safety position going Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State. Injury concerns in abundance, but definitely a selection here that I think is a very good one, capping off their day 2 run here. And the Rams going to close out round 3. And while we wait for the Rams selection, which likely is going to end up being wide receiver based on what I would see is their kind of need. Anthony, how do you feel about the Gabriel and the Winston selections?
Yeah, I think this is a good spot for Gabriel. I have him as an early day 3 guy, so this is effectively where I would have him. I think Miami is a good place for him and his skill set. He is Tua-like in that he can get the ball out quick, be that sort of just facilitator, sort of quarterback. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I do think Miami needs to add a quarterback. Just they can't keep doing the Skylar Thompson experience every time Tua gets hurt. So it certainly makes sense from that perspective. And then who was the other pick? Oh, yeah, Kevin Winston. Kevin Winston, I talked about him before. Talent-wise, if we went back to 2023, he would have been a first-round player. Obviously, the injury is very serious, and so that's why he will fall. But this could potentially be an insanely great value for San Francisco. And the comment said it. You already have a good young safety in Malik Mustafa. So giving the Niners Kevin Winston next to him really would be just a pretty dynamite young safety duo for the 49ers. So yeah, that's a pretty great pick for them.
Yep. And with the last selection here in the NFL draft, I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Rams. I'm going to go with a guy who's probably a little bit slept on in the community, but definitely has shown some statistical production during his time at San Jose State. It's Nick Nash, the wide receiver out of San Jose State. A converted quarterback. This is a guy you give him to Sean McVay and watch Sean McVay just put in some serious work for him. Definitely a day 3 guy that's slept on 1,500 yards last season, had the production that you love to see. I think that's a definite Sean McVay pick here. But that is it, folks. 3 rounds in the books, 32 teams. Want to first off thank all the NFL GMs that joined us tonight, having fun with us here on a Friday night. A little bit of housekeeping. First off, make sure if you're still watching, make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you turn on that notification bell so you get subscribed whenever the Draft Professors go live here at the NFL Draft Fanatic. Make sure that you're also following our lovely moderator on X at Randall Slifer. You can also find him on Blue Sky as well. Make sure you're following my lovely co-host Anthony Russo on X at Anthony_Russo97. You can also find me over on X at Spark Scouting on X as well. You can also check me out as a writer and analyst over at twsn.net. That's the Right Way Sports Network. Gentlemen, as we close out tonight, one final thought from each of you. Anthony, anything stick out to you tonight?
Yeah, I think the main thing for me was just how many really good players fell really far. And we can sit and we can sit here and, you know, we can point to GM decisions we wouldn't have made, but it does feel like this is a draft where that could happen in real life because of the, you know, sort of spectrum of grades that a lot of players have. So I do see the world where we are going to be, you know, in April talking about, you know, it's going to be round 3 and we're going to say, how on earth is this guy still on the board? I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, this is an interesting potential preview into that happening.
Yep, absolutely. Randall, as our lovely co-host and moderator, anything that sticks out to you tonight?
Yeah, you know, first of all, Anthony pretty much nailed everything. It's fun to see at the end of the round who's available, because at the end of round 1, you're looking at just salivating. At the end of round 2, still kind of salivating, to be honest with you, and that's super exciting coming into April. And I think the wide receivers are going to be super interesting. You know, Drew put Savion in that round 2. I think there's a lot of consensus that has Savion high in there, but the picking and choosing of your style of running back is probably going to be a lot of fun in that draft, where they drop, where they get picked and stuff like that. Matthew Golden coming in hot at late in the year and stuff like that. Which team picks what wide receiver and the scheme fit is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yep, absolutely. No, I agree. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think running back and wide receiver scheme fits is going to be important. And then also the quarterbacks. Obviously, we had a pretty significant slide with Milroe and Dart going into round 3, but there's such a wide variance on them. Some folks see them in the end of round 1. Some folks see them on day 3. So seeing where they kind of end up in tonight's episode, Dart going to Pittsburgh and Milroe going to the Rams, I think are probably 2 of the best fits that you're going to find for those guys. But ultimately, like we talked about, there's some serious talent that'll be had from picks 20 to about pick 100, even as we walk away after round 3 going into day 3. There's still some excellent talent. But folks, for all of you still watching, we appreciate you spending your Friday night with us here doing a 32 GM mock draft. For all of our GMs that joined us tonight, we appreciate you. For all of the folks tweeting out our picks on social media, we appreciate you as well. Like I talked about, make sure you like the video, make sure you share it, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on that notification bell. We will see you on the next episode, folks. From all of us here at the Draft Professor, class dismissed. Have a good night, guys.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mrs. R Relevant, the Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. Please follow the Draft Professor on X at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic. Please follow the Draft Professor channel on YouTube at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic. We look forward to seeing you on our podcast tomorrow.